So we have a really full agenda tonight, so I think it would be on our best interest if we get started. A couple of things to remind people. This is a private meeting that is held in public, so we do allow visitors. However, visitors are not permitted to speak during the meeting. We also, the 21st Century Commission, just to remind everyone here, is a fact-finding mission. We are putting together facts. We'll be making recommendations. The recommendations will then be submitted to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education will be the decision makers. So our job is to be fact finders. We have some special guests with us tonight. So this evening, one of the things that we had been talking about was that we really were looking to get some information from our central office staff, and we have a bunch of people, guests here tonight from central office, so I'd like to introduce. We have Pat Phelan, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Ann Botticelli, who is our new Director, Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction. So we're really excited to have her here. Brian Schulz is our District Treasurer. And Jan, I'm going to ask you to help me with your title because I wrote it down, and I know the end is Computer Services, but I forgot the beginning part of it.
Assistant Manager of Finance and Computer Services.
Perfect. Jan Lewandowski. So we're really excited that the four of our guests are able to join us tonight. Our subcommittee that was led by Brian Janik and by Corey had put together a list of questions that they were hoping would be able to be answered. So what we did was we forwarded, I kind of scribed for the group when Brian and Corey led the meeting, and I scribed the questions and typed them up and passed them along to central office, and they have been working diligently to get us some answers on the questions. Please feel free to ask any questions. I would ask that we kind of let them go, finish their thought process, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer questions. And I do know we have a few people that are on vacation. Brian Grimm is on vacation, John Judy is on vacation, Bob Rigby is coming late, so we've got some people. You're on vacation too. That's a question. So, but Brian, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you and let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you on this beautiful, fantastic, warm and sunny August 21st. I think it's the first sunny, warm night we've had all summer, by my recollection. Dr. Crawford has asked me to sit in and help provide the financial information. I'll generally try to bring together the group because we've worked together to get answers, because the questions in some instances cross boundaries of our responsibilities, but each of us has specific information if we want to delve into some of it in any depth. I've been here, just so that some of you who don't know me, 25 years, over 25 years. And in fact, when I got here in the late 80s, there were 2 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 6 elementary buildings, and this building was mothballed. And actually, the first time I worked here in 1978, 45 Allendale was where we had the central office. And those of you that know, in the 80s, we went through significant reduction in buildings such as Bellwood, Gardenville, Abbott Road. I don't know if I'm leaving anything out right now because it was before my time, but those are the 3 that I remember closest to my time there. And since that time, certainly we've seen this building move from empty to a central office location to a half-day kindergarten program to a full-day kindergarten program to a full-day kindergarten program for the whole district, with coverage of some of the Potter Road over students before we decided to reopen this and create this larger West Elementary zone in our district. Since then, we've had, at least by my count, 3 what we would call large or somewhat district reorganization for tenant zones. I remember in the old days that Union Road used to be the big divider in our district. If you lived on the east side of Union, you went to the east side. If you lived on the west side, you went to the west side. I speak to that because, you know, sometimes people who are new to our process think that we've been what we are right now forever, and we haven't. And we've really been evolving. Jan and Joe, and probably some of you went to school here, remember when our junior high was 7, 8, 9, and we had high schools on one side of town, and we also at one point had morning and afternoon sessions of high school before the east side was built. So we've kind of gone through the growth and the decline. There's an important piece of information that I think has driven a lot of what when we wanted to have this committee, this group, and I appreciate from the district side that you all have offered to spend time working on this, is when I was here in that time I referred to, we had over 8,500 students with the buildings I outlined. And now we have, as of last June, 6,700 students. We're very close, you know, looking at just if our enrollment stays level, and Dr. Phelan just shared with me that as of today, we have 461 kindergarten students registered, which is down from about 492 from last year. But if we just stayed level, and by 2017-18 we'd be at 6,400 students, and in 2021, 6,200. So we're dropping a couple hundred students a year. And that's with hoping that we maintain a kindergarten enrollment of around 470 to 480. And that hasn't been the trend. Now, I heard that someone was born. I always like to hear that because I'm always hopeful that the trend may be changing. So that's some of the history. Now, the other most important information, and I don't want to have to spend a lot of time if you don't want to hear it, but I have an extensive amount of information of what Dr. Phelan and I did starting really in 2010 with our unions, with the Board of Education and some in the community, knowing when we realized what type of budgetary gap we were facing, due in part to the state deciding that they could abandon us in part for about $35 million over the last 5 years. Our budget at that time for the 13-14 school year, which just ended, we were projecting to be $118 million. In 2010, we took steps with a lot of cooperation from our bargaining units, and our 14 year ended at spending 105. So we knew there was a problem. We've taken action. You've heard of it in many different forms, and I can get into any length of detail that you want at any time. But I want to point out that a lot has been done. The problem is the 35 is never going to come back. The problem is to get us back on the financial footing, we would probably need something like a $5 million tax increase once, because that's what we lose each year to what they call the gap adjustment. It's the amount they aren't paying us, which would be about a $6 per thousand tax increase, which would be about a $600 per each $100,000 home. So I don't know if there's any stomach, based on my experience in schools, to do that type of recovery. And we have been certainly damaged by subsequent decisions by the legislature on tax caps, budget caps, and other issues. So I can get into that at any length that you want. It has been spoken to at length, and I don't want to bore you at this time. I would like to then get right at question number one. We have the answers to the questions. When you've heard them, process them, if there's more information you want about the number or the information, you can prepare the document, provide the documents at a later point. Probably most importantly, we would have stuff available for the public hearings. Right now, we want you to know the spectrum of these 14 questions that you have. What's the dollar amounts in these areas? What we looked at in question number one was a generic building. We're working hard with you to diffuse this rumorology that starts about you've already picked or we've already picked. So what we did is design a generic facility elimination. That facility elimination, and this is all costs, that would be including supplies, materials, it would include staffing, is $974,840. That's benefits, So, and again, all the other supply items associated with do that. So then, again, the number is $974,840. Question number 2, and
No,
Brian,
I'm gonna-
Ed and Lisa, I'm not opposed to answering questions or you know, at each question if you want to do that.
I'll let you go first. Go ahead.
That premise of that figure is based on complete elimination of all those employees, correct? It's not including it if you were to absorb some employees from one building and move them into another.
No, we've what I've done to work on that model is combine a couple buildings to see what would happen, stay within class size guidelines, and we would need some of those staff members to do that.
Okay, so that figure that you threw out there reflects that.
Yes, this is really what I don't want, the word excess isn't a fair word, but it's the number that becomes vulnerable at that point in time. And I not knowing that Dr. Crawford has talked about potential layoffs, and I know Mr. Catafio and Mrs. Rupert were there, and others, I'm not afraid to say that we've talked about that could be a potential outcome, though there's other mitigating factors that could occur. But I hope, Dan, that answers the question specifically.
So, that number is a yearly savings?
That would be a yearly savings.
You're talking in general, but every building is a different size, so how much of a variation are we talking?
What we've looked at, because we were factoring in the fact that the student load would carry the teachers, many of the teachers, many of the support like music, art, you know, some of the other support, those were not as affected as what are clearly in our mind the structural pieces that are the shell of, and it's not just administrative, but would reflect duplication if brought into another setting.
Okay.
An example, and I'll use this one because we won't be getting rid of a librarian because we have one, we're sharing one right now, but if we had a librarian, we would say, oh, a librarian would be pulled out because we have 9 buildings. That's the mentality we used in looking at the staffing. And we used what we would feel would be the lowest person in the process, because as Pat could allude to, if anyone has questions, we have certain responsibilities through negotiations and through contracts that there are bumping rights. Okay. And as we knew that anyone who went through the East Elementary and watched, it's quite a lot of work, and Joe and Pat spent a lot of time together trying to figure out, okay, who really is the next person, and it's a lot of work, but that's the only way that you can do it in the contracts.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Question number 2, and this surrounded the use of Title I money, and we have 3 or 4 buildings that are Title I moneyed buildings. Any equipment purchased through the use of federal grant money, Title I money, must be in a Title I building. So that equipment will be moved, and I'm not going to say it follows the children. It follows the evaluation of the program and where the Title I basis ends up. Let's say everyone goes to Clinton Street, and Clinton falls into a Title I. They're the Title I, and we have to make sure that any excess goes into that building. And certainly that will be one of the mysteries of when we get to picking a building, where do those students go, and what does that do, and how does that affect the Title I? And that's impossible to really foreshadow now. But if we don't, we do have to repay the federal government or return the equipment to the federal government via the state. And the follow-up question, and then I'll go back to you, is the follow-up question was down a couple pieces later in the second, number 3. It costs us about $1,500 for each Promethean board to move it from its present location. And you know, we have varied numbers in our buildings, but 1,500 times the number that we would have to pull. That's the most significant asset. That's a Title I asset that I see us having to move, and we do have needs for them, and we will find Title I usage for them.
So I'm going to start with a few questions. If the equipment is not necessarily needed, it has to just, what, sit at that building then? You know what I mean? Like, if let's say a building closes that's fully Promethean boarded, and they go to the next school, but the next school's pretty well set.
It doesn't matter what school the children go to. What you do is you look at all your buildings. You have a redesignation of what the Title I buildings are.
Right.
And it could be East Senior, could be East Middle, could be West Middle, could be West Senior. You look at the building. Now, the 2 senior highs, we're almost at 100% Promethean board-wise, so I don't see them going there. But the middle
Right.
schools and all the elementaries are short Promethean boards.
Okay.
So they would distribute. They don't follow the children. They follow the Title I
Yes,
designation.
but you're confident there would be a home for all that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just knowing where we are in the present state of Promethean board purchases and the buildings and rooms, which are predominantly elementary, non-Title I, because we used the ERA money, which was the aid that we got from the federal government 3 years ago, to buy those. It was one time, could only be used in the title, and we didn't have enough money to go non-title. So a lot of the buildings that were non-title have not come anywhere close to the number that are in the title buildings.
So if we close a building and move those Promethean boards, it's going to cost us $1,500 per board?
Yes.
Is that something the district pays for?
Yes.
And do we hire out for that, or is that done with our staff that we have?
We generally
We
would
hire
hire
out?
out those
Okay.
because of the uniqueness of the product.
And is there a time limit?
No.
So it's just at some point we
Yeah.
have to install them?
Yes.
That involves a lot of rewiring and reconnecting and
Yes. You know, data wiring and, you know, ports
That's what you're
between the
paying
teacher's
for.
workstation, yes. Yes, if, you know, physically, you know, unbolting the, you know, board off the wall really isn't a big deal. It's the wiring, you know, it's all wiring.
And the
That's what
interesting
it's all
point
about.
at this point in time is we're moving to portable Promethean
I was
boards
just gonna say, yeah.
because we've come to recognize some of the changes that could happen. But we've also recognized that some classrooms, if you put them in there, they may not be used as much. So if they're portable, you can move them to a place or location. Portability also allowed us the flexibility because we don't have them all in every classroom, and we would like to. But portability gives us the ability to move around. But it is quite a bit of work. Joe, the cost when we installed was closer to $10,000.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So it's a little bit less because a lot of the wiring in the whole district has been done. It's really specific location.
Brian? Okay, Eric?
Eric.
Man.
Hey, you should have done your homework.
With the pink. 2 questions. If I remember correctly from Mr. Graham, I believe is every school designated a Title I school?
No.
And then that changes every year, correct?
To be honest with you, they're not they're not all changing.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
there are some buildings that have historically always been and always may be. Where you've had the flex in and out has been at East Elementary when we had the elementary program there, because you would have some flex in the population. Clinton Street and Allendale actually was for a little bit, but has predominantly not been. Northwood, Winchester, and Potter, and I believe one of the middle schools, I think West Middle, have been traditional Title I locations.
And then last question, can you just briefly go over, just for my refresher, what makes a Title I school? Because I know there's a formula, but just to...
It's based a lot on the free and reduced lunch program through applications and incomes in those families. And each year, that's why we have a big push this time of year for parents to get them in. Because a Title I designation for us is important, not just for food service, but also for additional aid in the Title I program. And that's one of the things we always try to encourage, is to have our parents sign up for the free or reduced lunch program. So that's the primary point of entrance for the title designation.
Great, thank you.
Question. I wasn't here last meeting. Do we have a document showing how many Promethean boards are in each of the buildings that are
Yes.
on the table?
Yes.
Thanks. And if you remember when we went on the tour, on the different building tours, we noticed at some of the buildings, remember, we saw a lot more than at some of the others. Like this particular building doesn't have as many as some of the other
If you email
elementaries.
me, I can put it on the webpage. That's cool.
Could you get to the point to where, say you got $1,500 for the school that, say, Potters, $1,500 per board to move it. Could we also have additional costs because let's say you want to move it to, say some of them need to go to Clinton Street. And you say, well, wait a second, Clinton got a Title I designation, but they weren't a Title I designation when they got their current boards. So what we can do is we can take their current boards out of their building that aren't Title I designated, move them to another school, so that now we can put these ones in. Is the state that specific
No.
where it's that, or can you just say, well, there were 50 of them here, we're now going to take those 50 are Title I, so these 50 that we had that were taken out here are now not Title I.
I guess to truthfully answer your question, I don't know if they would give us that far a latitude. I think what they would look at is seeing us actively evaluate our title situation and pursue putting them in there first. There are other options to look at as far as asking the state, do you want these back? Do you really want these back? Do you want these? Do you want the money? Do you really want these back? So I mean, there's other aspects of it that I think we would look at, but I think we would truthfully be looking at it, knowing that we have some pretty long-term, well-established, needs, and knowing that in some locations we don't have that filled. I think we would be looking at moving them. I mean, physically, they're probably going to end up in the location that has been less likely to have been Title I for a long period of time. And your example about Clinton, because it's been on the bubble, may not, be the one. It could be this building. It could be Allendale. Those are the more likely, scenarios. And the numbers are not huge in an elementary building. Some of the building you mentioned has 23. So I think it's not like we have 50 that are going to get up and go. It's a much smaller number.
Is there equipment installed that's under the Title I that really can't be moved or can't be salvaged? Again, like I don't know if there's an example or not, but is taking those things out, they don't ruin them in any way, or you know what I'm asking? Like, it's not always
I guess,
worth it to move outdated technology.
I don't think we have in our equipment in that area anything that strategically has that improbability of movement. I mean, I've seen them when we've moved around lifting the safe that's in our office, and that's about as close to being immovable as something that is. There isn't. So I mean, we have the capability of moving those.
Okay.
I think it's about time, and that's probably the other question that Brian is how quick. Do they expect it on the first day of school? It's not going to happen like that. It's going to happen over a period of time during that year.
Okay.
So, and again, it will depend how much lead time we have in doing it. So those are more of the practical issues that we deal with. The real issue is you're asking what happens to them. We don't have to pay anybody money back unless we end up trying to use them in other than their intended purpose. And then it would be our responsibility to report on our own. It's a self-reporting process.
So then is there a lot of other stuff like the Promethean boards?
Not really. That has been our significant tie to Title I. Most of our other technology and equipment, Jeff Pacer being here could also answer to the TVs and other things. They've generally been purchased either through BOCES leases or purchasing of state-aided hardware, which could go to any building.
Okay.
So we're generally pretty good with the rest of our equipment. Question number 3 is a rather complex question regarding the concern that I raised a couple of years ago of what would it cost to close a building, and the cost of closing the building can be formed in 2 ways. One is the mothballing cost, which Joe Farr has worked up. It's not substantial. It's probably below $40,000 to maintain a mothballed building. until a sale would be completed. And that would include custodians having to go in, having to run some heats, because the state does not want you to let a building go moldy. The state has, by the way, encouraged people to mothball buildings and put them in a unused status for a while, because they don't want to see you sell a building and then 2 years later say you need to build a building. But in our situation, looking at what we may have to do, it may take that long to sell a building anyways. So I think I want you to be aware that there is a cost attached to closing the doors and then having a custodian stop by every now and then, check systems. You have to run water to make sure your lines don't freeze. You have to keep it heated at a certain level, and there will be some electricity for security purposes. So the building doesn't just become vacant like we did, unfortunately, to 45 Allendale and the Gardenville facility on Union Road, which ended up becoming morbid, mold-filled facilities that hurt eventually the value of the property when it went to sell.
Is that $40,000 per year or month?
Per year.
What about the, and this is probably Joe, what about, I mean, we still have to maintain the outside,
That includes mowing and snow, and some snow clearing.
I know, are we putting in there any sort of repairs? Say certain buildings have worse scenarios to them, roofs and all that? That's not including any of that?
No.
So nothing out of the ordinary?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the big and most significant loss to the district when you sell a building, and everybody wants to get that $1 million or $500,000, is that if you are receiving state aid on the debt that you're still paying, we have a mortgage on all of our properties, and one to describe it is that we have a mortgage on all of our properties. The two properties most frequently mentioned by the group, uniquely, both have state aid coming to them over the next 7 to 13 years in the amount of $1,050,000. It's almost identical. There's about $8,000 difference between the two most frequently mentioned buildings. That aid stops coming to you the minute you sell the building, though you're still paying the mortgage. So the sales money, and this is what the state is still trying to figure out, is that they want us to give them the money, and then the deal's done, you're on your own, or do we hold the money and it therefore replaces that state aid that you're no longer going to get. So while it's mothballed, you'd still get the state aid. That's the really strange thing. But once you sell it, you're responsible for the full payment of the mortgage instead of the 71.4% that the state now picks up. Pretty substantial, pretty interesting, and this is a very new thought process by the geniuses that have been running our state in the last few months and years. They've realized that places were starting to close things and that they were still getting state aid for a building that didn't own any or didn't have, and that they also had the sales money. So they haven't missed many of the tricks, to be honest with you. And I think that's a little disconcerting, because a lot of people think you sell to get the money. I'll tell you, your first question and the first answer is why you deactivate a building. It's the ongoing annual maintenance staffing that is the cost of running the building. Our annual debt in 13 years, if it's about 13 million, it's only $100,000 in debt a year. So it is the 974,000. Now at this point, it's probably good for me to interject three things in my history here too, because people think about what we could get or what we can't get. In 1992-ish, we sold some property on North Road for $3,500 bucks. I think there's a there's a housing development there now. 95, the Gardenville property on Union Road, Main Street, West Seneca, top road, $300,000 for a fairly huge facility. But it was like many of our buildings in that 1929 era of construction, mold and asbestos, and they were made of walls that were as wide as I am. I mean, it was just the way they were constructed. In '96, we sold the 45 Allendale to a developer for the housing that's on there now for about $75,000. And the most recent sale was the Potter Road sale, which was approximately 7 acres, between 5 and 7 acres, for $500,000. Vacant land is more valuable than facilities where someone has to decide what to do with the property or destroy it. So I think that's part of the reason we were motivated to sell vacant land, get on the tax rolls.
When was the Potter Road deal done, do you know?
It was in the 2007-2008 school year.
That kind of goes to the state though, wanting you to mothball and not sell. That whole premise of, will you be able to get us the numbers for all the buildings that are like that, not just those two?
I could get it would take some work.
Okay, well, I'm just asking. I didn't know how easy it was to come up with that.
Because you're looking at capital projects that would go back to 2006 and before that, you literally have to follow each project and then figure out how much has been paid down on it, calculate interest out. It can be done. I think I would save that to a time when we're closer to knowing more about what we want to do. And again, part of the reason I said the last few pieces of information is I would suggest the group don't focus on the sales value of a property. It's really the value of the ongoing cost, because that's the drag that fiscally we have to work in. Because, as one of my 2 opening points, our enrollment has dropped so significantly and continues to go. But that's why we're here. We're trying to match enrollment to facilities. And, I have for many, many years here been told by people there's a housing development here where our enrollment's going to go up. And then I would look and we'd have 50 homes built next door. 50 students would come out of it, and they were split between K through 12, so there was no real impact on any one grade level or any building, because 3 or 4 kids in a building doesn't affect the grade level. So those are things that we can talk more about as we move forward. If there's no questions on what we've done so far.
Real quick question.
Sure.
Can we at least take a good assumption that if we did sell the building, we would at least, there wouldn't be a cost to the district?
I don't know that you can assume that.
So we may not be able to sell it for what we would owe back.
I think we will be taking action internally shortly with doing some work to try to establish market values on a number of properties, just so that question may have something. But as our real estate agent knows, you can say all you want with market value. It's, do you have a buyer, and a buyer who wants that property for what you think would be the ultimate value of the property. And in 2 or 3 of the instances that I spoke, we didn't really have a buyer. We had someone who took it, and the good examples are really the Bellwood, unfortunately, property, which we sold many years ago, which still sits vacant. And the good example is probably the Gardenville one, where it was demolished and a whole different setting was created on Union Road. I'll leave people to decide what they feel about hotels. I mean, I think from a tax standpoint, I'm happy we converted property that was not taxable and not usable for us to taxable property. And I think that's the other piece that when we get to that analysis is, okay, let's say you do sell it and it's developed, what type of income will it generate from a tax collection standpoint? And that's also something you get every year. So that's another side to it that I think you have to, that we looked at and we've always looked at, and is something that is important to the process of deciding to sell or to mothball.
Wouldn't it be fair to say, though, when you look at the tax rolls, the climate of development, maybe Bob can speak to this a little better than I, more of a question, that it seems to be the trend that developers are now getting these 10-year, 15-year tax exempt rates. So really to figure that income in is probably a moot point.
It wasn't as much on the most recent sale as you would have thought. It was different. There weren't enticement. There were some levels of enticement based on certain programs that were given at the assessment level at the state. But I do know the pilot exemptions are so unique, and that's where most people get upset with the ones from like the ECIDA, where you're really 15 years of paying very little tax. And that's where, Dan, I think you're right on, is that you can't always depend on it being, oh, we're going to get $36 per thousand on that $20 million investment that somebody makes. It may not come anywhere close to that. Well, the other thing you found is that when someone builds something and then the assessment comes, they then tend to challenge the assessment based on the economic value of the property versus just the market, market value of just the facility. Because assessment is not just what your home costs, it's what in a business, it's the market value based on the corporate sales. And I know, Bob, you know more about that than I ever could pretend to.
Well, a little bit. I'm not so much in the commercial side of things, but I know some of the concepts, but I don't practice in the commercial side.
So I'm going to real quick throw out, when we sell vacant land, say we sell off a piece of property like you did in the past, that doesn't affect anything related to the grounds, the money from the state, or any of that?
We did that before they changed the law.
Okay, so it does affect it now?
It does affect it now.
Okay.
Any sale now is contingent upon any related debt to that facility.
Okay.
And all our facilities include all the vacant land around them.
Okay.
There's no, we would not be allowed to sever off a piece of property, sell it, and say, well, it doesn't have anything to do with that mortgage.
Okay.
It would. And just as if you had a 20-acre house and you sold 15, the bank's going to knock on the door and say, you've just diminished the value of your asset.
Okay.
That's what they look at.
Okay.
Number 4, I think we're on. What happens to the playgrounds at Potter Road? And I can best answer that by saying what we've tried to do in the past, most recently with East Elementary, is we try to talk with the PTA that's involved in the development of that playground, see what their interests are, and see where there's commonality between new locations that those children may go to, whether it's 1, 2, or 3. The most recent one, East Elementary, we had discussions with the parents on both sides as to whether they wanted to take the East Elementary playground, pull it, and put it at Clinton. And Mr. Farr and I worked up costs to do that. We were prepared to do it. And then the parents from the PTA said, well, the building's still going to be there. We would like the kids to have a place to go to. So we left it. If it's sold down the road, that obviously may change the perception that people have of what they want to do with that. But that, I think, is something we believe is dearly done with input from the PTA. They're largely, and in some instances, the students, they're largely the ones that have funded it, and in many instances, put it together and put it in the ground. The reality that Mr. Farr might share with you down the road when we get to that is some of them have lost their value already because of rust, maintenance, or time, like we found with the Robert Leathers playgrounds. Is we thought those would last forever, and all of a sudden we realized that there's about a 20-year shelf life with that type of playground. So they've been removed. And in fact, that type of wood is rarely, if ever, recommended anymore for playgrounds by our insurance company. They've gone to the hard molded plastic options in most instances. So we certainly believe that the PTA is an integral part in their acquisition and has to have a say. Obviously, when the building's sold or the property is sold, there's a finality to that process.
Just to let you know, the reason why the issue with the playground at Potter's is they just last year there was a whole bunch of new equipment that was bought, and it's sitting in storage and stuff like that. And I know that Palladino said that he would put it in for free, and that was supposed to go in this summer, and it hasn't. No ground has been broken on that. And I know last year the big thing was we're not going to bring our big trucks out while the kids are in school.
Yeah.
So I think that people are just worried about there's all this equipment that's bought for a brand new playground, that it's going to be used somewhere. That there's it can have a home.
That would, and again, the intent might be that the PTA, the PTA in that building may decide that we want to donate it to a location if that location is amenable to that donation. Joe, I know, has mentioned that to me because when we saw the question, I asked, and he told me he's taking good care of it over in a storage way so that it's of value when a decision's made. And you know, again, I think that's something that we'll work with the parents closely on because it's really their asset.
I'm gonna interrupt real quick. The questions, in case everyone's wondering, were emailed to the committee. They were put together by the subcommittee when we met to work on obviously getting prepared for this evening. And anyone watching at home will be able to find it on our website if they want to follow along with the questions. Just in case anyone's wondering, you know, whether we just put questions in a hat and are pulling them out. There's what last week we worked really hard on coming up with as many questions so you can be prepared as opposed to us just randomly asking you questions. So I just want to throw that out there now. Sorry.
That's great. Question number 5 is, what is the cost?
I'm sorry, Joan, did you have a question?
Well,
I'm sorry, Joan.
Paladino must be waiting to see what's going to happen to the property before he puts the...
I don't know.
Knowing him.
Yeah, I had the good fortune of working with him on the last sale, and I use that term loosely. But we got a good deal. So, what is the cost to move the equipment to a new school from Potter's Road? Joe's, we would do that all with our staff, and we guess under $10,000. It's our staff. They move equipment every school year throughout the district. You know, as Jim Zaki and Joe Farno. So it just would be, as we did with the East Elementary, it's a very focused. The big work, actually, believe it or not, is in the library situation. And we work closely with BOCES, who helps coordinate our BOCES library services, and they help us go through the library, the building that would be gone, and they call it weeding the books. Those books that are duplicates or believed to be unnecessary are pulled so that we only move into the new library those books that would add to that library collection. And we certainly try to make sure everything we have is utilized somewhere. And all the librarians were great last time. They all worked together from all of our buildings to help do that. So they knew where they might be needed or who might want that book. And you know, that was really a very time-consuming process. It was well over a week of work by the librarians, but they did a great job doing that. So it does get into little things like that. So we certainly would be looking at that. And the 6th question I'm going to skip and I'll come back to because the 7th is really corollary to number 5 and also the previous questions about the Promethean boards, and that is, what happens to any equipment that needs to be stored? We have storage that we have in our facility, but our first choice would be to evaluate the equipment, make a determination where it best fits in, and utilize it within our school district. We then would weed down equipment to a point where it's either determined that we store it because there may be a future need, or we then would make a decision if it's unusable, and then we look at it for scrap or for sale, depending upon what is in the best interest of the district. We've had garage sales, so to speak, and it's a lot of work and a lot of time for not a lot of return. We've done better with going to scrap and going to scrap metal on some of the pieces, and you know, we would certainly look at that, but any piece of equipment, and I found people for years in our district, when they see that something's available, that people start to move around it, and there's a lot of noise that goes on, and some of it's a good feeling, and all of a sudden somebody wants it, and it goes to a building. So our intent is to use those assets that we need. Certainly, we're going to have the same number of students, hopefully, at the time this move is made. So we're going to need some type of classroom furniture, and depending upon what the recommendations are and what is done, you may have shifts that have to occur like we did last year with more elementary small side kids going to Clinton Street, and more larger 5th, 6th, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th going to the middle schools. So there is some movement that's done within that. Now going back to what is the cost of moving the district office to Ebenezer, Joe's estimate that we've looked at and talked about is about $135,000, largely because of the extensive amount of wiring and connectiveness that goes on in the 2 floors where we have different office spaces. And the benefit is that we would be much closer to the server. The unfortunate thing is it doesn't matter how close you are, you still need either Wi-Fi connections or hardwire connections. And on many of our types of systems, we prefer hardwire for many reasons that would become apparent because of some of the things that we do. So we would have to build things like the safe, and then I don't see a huge amount, and Joe, you can jump in if you want, I don't see a huge amount of facility modifications other than the electronics.
Right, and I just want to be clear on that estimate isn't creating a glamorous new palace, okay? That's basically using the walls that we have, the floors that we have.
Can you repeat? She wanted the figure.
What's the figure again? I'm sorry.
Approximately $135,000.
Thank you.
Would that cost also include additional parking?
Yes, I have that in there.
You do?
Yes.
Thank you. I was going to give a Pullman, I'm not sure, but Joe is sure. It will be for small cars, though, smart cars.
No viewers, huh?
Yeah.
Old viewers.
Quick question. You said that'd be moving anything without moving existing walls and things of that nature. In a slightly more optimal situation, would there be moving of walls or anything, or is it not necessary? I mean, can you fit in there and work optimally?
Well, we'll fit in there because that's one of those buildings where the walls are as white as Brian is.
Okay.
He said earlier. So, you know, it's not conducive to reconstructing in that building. You know,
People may have much more spacious offices simply because of that. There's space, more than I think we would need, or very close to exactly what we would need.
Does that
but it would be bigger rooms as opposed to what we've done over time is divided up and split rooms up. Like we've done in the business office and personnel and in pupil services, just to give people some conferencing areas and general work areas. But I believe we would be able to do that without a significant amount. And I would tell you probably over time, you would see some of those other things start to happen as people see different needs evolve within their comfort level or lack of comfort level with the sizes becomes more apparent. But
small pickaxe at the
that type of thing. The emergency services would continue to stay in that building? The emergency police have that emergency services?
The CERT, your West Seneca CERT team and all that?
They would
continue to stay there?
I don't think we've envisioned taking them out. I think if anything, we've looked at where we have some other situations at East Middle where we have like food service and or continuing ed. That might be something you would consider down the road to centralize those types of operations and get them out of the buildings. I understand a lot of the reasons for this question, beyond having more space in here for more students, is the secure environment, which really is part of the answer in 12-2 will come up when we get to 12, is, I think most of the concern I've heard over my years here about security is as you intermingle non-student, parental, teacher relationships, you have a big burly business guy coming in every day that scares the heck out of people. So we don't want the kids to be scared every day when he comes in, and I think that's what people get concerned about. And whether we think that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what I believe the biggest concern has been expressed to us over time.
One question I know we can probably look at that hasn't been addressed is, does the maintenance cost increase if there's more staff and everything at Ebenezer or in another building? Like obviously there would be more stuff going on there. Is it significant or?
It would increase, okay, but adults don't get the same services as kids do.
So it's
okay?
not-
So it would be
I would tell you, and I'm not Joe's the expert, but we have a very inefficient air conditioning system in this building. We don't air condition many of our school buildings. So what you may be paying now for that type of HVAC cost is probably going to be diminished here and increase there. And I think the issue then would be, do we have systems that go in that are more efficient? And I think that is part of what we'd have to work on. And Joe has told me that the systems we put in like these many years ago are the most inefficient. And the systems you buy nowadays are more efficient just by buying them, you know, owning them and putting them in. So I think that building is all heated now.
Yes.
The only thing, you would take the electricity that we use in the form of all the technology we have in our offices, that would just be moved over there. So I don't know, Ed. I mean, and I guess that's one of those things we'll find out. I'm sure the bathroom usage will go up. So we'll watch that closely.
No one says you guys have to have air conditioning.
Well, no one does.
I'm kidding.
Any other questions on that type of change? I think we're beginning to move into an area in questions 8 and 9 that Ann and Pat may have some input on. I do want to point out on Ann's behalf regarding the questions about grades 5-8 configuration. I'm sure Ann can speak to many of it. I do know Dr. Crawford is passionate about what he believes a district should have. I would suggest that Dr. Crawford be consulted on this question, and perhaps a group similar to the group that we had last year when we did go to the 5, 6, 7, 8, and 6, 7, 8 with some study work. That information should be brought back up and shared with the community again. But I only want to point that out so that you know that Dr. Crawford's strong feeling about the 5-8 configuration. And the question is really, does the district have a class size policy? Yes, we do. We've had it since '95. I've shared a copy of it with Lisa and Ed, and they can share it with the group at their leisure. We still follow it in anything we do, even as we talked the last day or two about class sizes as we start this September. That is our guideline. And we've had some noted instances of going over them back in the late 1996, 7 under a previous superintendent. And I remember the wrath that came on from parents who had 31 or 33 kids in an elementary setting, and we learned our lesson. The guidelines are the guidelines, and some may not like them, but they're the guidelines. And we stick to them. Every projection, every analysis we do uses them. So I at this point, I know there might be more directed questions about program, curriculum, 5 through 8, and I would defer those, if you have any, to Ian and Pat.
What is the class size?
It depends, Aunt Joan, on your grade level. Obviously, primary levels, K1 and 2, are going to have lower guidelines, somewhere around the 20 mark. And your upper grade levels, so 4th, 5th, and 6th are going to be somewhere between 26 and 29. So it really, the early grade levels, we like to use a target, but a lot of that's going to be dependent on the enrollment in the schools, and the enrollment in the schools varies every year. But you like to target, quite frankly, the minimum of the ranges that Lisa and I have is what we'd like to be able to target at it, but we're not always able to achieve that because enrollment varies from school to school. And so we'd like to be able to do that. But then at the secondary level, which would be grades 7 through 12, when you get involved in English, math, science, and social studies, the ratio of students to teacher, it just changes. It's usually between 110 to 130. So the ratio at the secondary level is generally 110 students or to 130 students per teacher.
I think as we've talked and had discussions, certainly You know, this group may recommend review and may have their opinions on class size. One of the things I mentioned to Ed and Lisa in talking about it is Pat and I were very much involved under Superintendent Kovach with an effort to drop the class size when things were going well. And I think just about the time in 2008 that we really thought things were going good and we were going to hit midpoint targets as our high points, we got a rate cut. Every effort was made, our hope, our goal was to do that. And part of the reason we're here is that we don't have the resources to achieve that. And one of the ways to maybe do it is through some form of consolidation, which takes out some of the overhead and then allows resources to go back in. Somebody asked me the other day regarding the program, you know, what happens? Well, if we maintain what we're doing right now, we will be doing less of the different things that we do for kids. And I don't want to say one thing because we're on TV. If I say one thing, everybody will say that I said that is going. It will be across the board. And I think part of what we're trying to work on, and I know your committee is trying to work on, is how do we maintain the things, and I described it in something I said to the state, is those things that those things that our community has become accustomed to us providing our students. And that's a wide range of services that some of you may never have touched, but each one of you may have touched a different type of service. And I think that's the hardest part in the whole programming piece. And right now we are in fact looking at some levels of programs and electives and choices, including this to, you know, try to balance our ability to meet the requirements of the state. So, you know, we don't have a pot of gold. We're trying to create some flexibility in part through this effort. So I think that's another reason this effort is important, to help us try to maintain some of the things that we've come, you know, to really want to hit.
Yeah, I know we spent a lot of time at the beginning of this committee when we formed working on what we feel is important,
What we value.
as a community, and really when it came down to it, it was a lot of the programs, it was a lot of the things that the kids have, you know, as opposed to a building.
Mm-hmm.
So we can, I can actually share that with you if you're interested. We have a really nice, fun sheet you can hang on your wall.
I would actually
Yeah,
like to see
yeah.
that.
I have a question, if you won't mind, at the risk of sounding like I'm taking a shot at somebody, which I am not, or a group. You know, we talk a lot about the teachers in class. How about some of the auxiliary services that are provided? And I'm just asking this question because I don't know. When you take in the psychologists, the social worker groups, are those state mandated, or is that extra?
Well, I would tell you the psychologist is mandated based on CSE requirements, and I wish that we had Brian here. We could get that clarified.
You're not going to be able to work on developing the needs for those students that are classified without the services of your psychologist. And I mean, and so there's not a mandate that says that you have to have a ratio or something like that. It really kind of depends. I think that if Brian were here, and I'm going to give a general estimate, we have around 6,700 students right now in the district. I'll say approximately 1,200 or so of our students are considered classified. And each year, a review is made of their needs, and certainly the psychologists and the input from the social workers and the guidance counselors and the other members of our support staff. By that I mean the physical therapists, the occupational therapists, and our nurses all have a significant role to play when we look at each individual students and their needs, and to be able to the program to be able to meet their needs. So, you know, those staff play a critical role. And there's also on the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 504, in addition to your classified students, students that have special needs aren't all classified. There's, you know, Section 504 of the Disabilities Act, and I'll say the most significant piece of that is speech services. And, you know, you have those. I think that I heard one estimate in terms of how many needs are held, or what's known as community and special education, is something like over 3,500 needs a year that are held in order to be able to assess the needs of our 6,700 students, but you know, in particular those 1,200 that are considered classified.
And affiliated with it, Dan, is the concept that in an IEP or an individual educational program, you could have required an OT service, a PT service, a counseling service, psychological or a speech. There are all these services that get mandated through there. And the hard part for us, but the part that I think could make some effort is to try to show what is the mandated versus the non-mandated. It's a blurred line, as many things have become over time. But most of these have some mandate based on, in most instances, an IEP, and those that the committee provides for that student.
And again, I didn't throw this out to take a shot at any particular group of people, because people who are my age that went through this system, these positions didn't exist when we went through school. We didn't have a social worker in every school. We didn't have a psychologist. And I personally, thankfully, I've never needed to use those services. And I understand the individual plans and all that stuff and where it goes. It was just clarification.
Yeah,
It's a huge part of what we do.
It is.
And I think when Brian is at the next meeting, that would definitely be something that he would be able to whip out his spreadsheet and, give us all of those numbers and tell us all of that.
And again, as we're doing this, I don't want somebody with a general brush saying just let's get rid of all the social workers. Why do we need that?
No,
and I don't, what I mean? Because there are people in the community who think that way.
I think what the difficulty is, and you focused on it, and I would try personally to avoid saying some others that I know are not mandated services that we provide, and it's outside of the student services area. There are programs that we don't have to provide, and some of those will come up in a later question. And I do think that if things became even more difficult, those are the things that you have to start looking at. And as Ann would probably allude to, is that we see, whether we like it or not, certain requirements that and targets that we're supposed to meet with student graduation and outcomes. And that's really what they're trying to drive our focus on. Communities like ours have great pride in a lot of the other things that we do, whether it's athletic, music, art, academies, so I think we try to, and I think if I took the time probably to, and I've already seen some of the things I mentioned on the list of wants. I mean, I see you've already expressed those as things you want to have. And that's the difficulty we see, and that's why we're here, because we're trying to find a way to keep as much of that in place as we can. And some of it, as we reduce in size, and that's the part that we look at a lot, is, okay, we've had one for every building. We might have an access. Do we still need that extra one? If we go to a lower class size, do we need an extra? Do we need the literacy or the reading teacher? What do we need? Or do we need to push in for AIS support for kids that aren't doing well? So you really have such a wide spectrum of things that we've provided over time. And I like to describe how school builds programs is turn around and look at the wall and look how the bricks are laid. That's how programs are developed. And it's very rare that someone at the state level says my brick is no longer required. Because when the big talk 4 years ago was that there would be mandate relief, I'm still waiting for the memo that gives me the first one.
Me too, brother.
Yeah. So we got our aid cut. You got your aid cut in different ways. And they said there'd be mandate relief, but there's no one there who sponsored that legislation and supported that legislation that wants to dare say, I'm going to give up something that I put through and put into work. So that's why one of the answers to the questions was, what did mandates do? And mandates, I've always defined as, and Dan, you know this because of what we do with you and the police. Mandates aren't always what's required. It's what the community wants to have. Safe schools. There's no mandate that says you have to have police officers or security guards or cameras. But if we hadn't done that and spent well over $3 million in the last couple of years, I don't know if people would feel happy based on what we've seen going on in schools over the last decade. So mandates are really interesting. And the mandates we complain most about are those that are put on by the state without reference to, do we really need it? I don't think anybody would argue that security of the buildings is one of the primary focuses that we go through every day. We have committees on it, you know, and I know we meet with the chief very frequently, especially when there's crisis going on, not here, but in other places, so that we get debriefed as to what are we looking for. And they've been great working with this, by the way, if anybody wants to know. Dan has been, you know, really an asset to the district. And he didn't give me any money, and he didn't promise me anything, but I just know he is.
But just to follow up on what Brian said, you know, and some of the assessments that we make in terms of, you know, what actually is necessary, and Brian's alluded to a couple of times, is the librarian, and we reduce the number of librarians. Librarians are not mandated, but you can have a school, and how can you say you're going to reduce your librarians? Well, there are other ways that we can be able to provide that services without necessarily having to replace that person. And then that leaves Mr. Catafio to have to explain to his membership why it is we didn't hire the librarian. And it comes down to the economic pieces, but we do that. But those are the kinds of issues that we struggle with in order to be able to say what kind of services can we reduce to some extent without necessarily impacting our overall operation and negatively impacting the educational experience of our students, which is, you know, first and foremost. Yeah, Joan?
I think that parents are becoming more demanding of services. I mean, I know that there's a family that has an autistic child, and they're very demanding. They know some of the things that are out there, and they go to this. They're not in this school district, but
sure.
And they're demanding.
And it's become very legalistic. Right. And there's a lot of advocates, both student advocates and legal advocates, that come in order to be able to assess your services you're providing to specific students given their needs. And certainly we're going to have to be required, otherwise, to provide those services. Otherwise, we're going to be facing, you know, some liability otherwise.
She's relentless. She hasn't stopped. She's, you know, gone through.
So Brian's right. I mean, we have to go through. We have certain mandated services beyond the mandated services. There's certain things that you perceive are mandated, and you just need to be able to assess whether or not that particular function, you know, we can find other ways to be able to meet the needs without necessarily incurring additional costs. Yeah.
Couple questions. The first one I have is, you mentioned that there's $1,050,000 that's state aid to Potters right now. Now obviously we still have the students. When we move the students, if we move the students to another location, they're still, the schools they go to will get an increase in state aid, right? So it's not that,
No, it works.
oh, so.
Number one, I didn't say the name of that building that will not be named by me. And I won't name any building. But the way the formula works, there's very little aid that is, it's all based on student enrollment, but it's put in a general bubble.
Okay.
So as long as you have that number of students, the bubble stays inflated. When enrollment drops, and that's part of the reason our aid has gone down, is that the total amount you get. So location of the aid is that there's no correlation, because we generally say all the aid goes to all the kids proportionately as opposed to those kids. Now services may be a little different, and many of us know that in some buildings there might be an additional AIS support person, or there may be additional SRO support in certain buildings at certain levels. But the aid itself is, you know, about $38 million to $40 million.
So we wouldn't necessarily be losing that $1 million.
We will lose that million, because that's the one piece of the formula that has nothing to do with children.
Oh, okay, that's the one that's based
the way
on
the
market,
way
right?
the state aid works is you have a bid component based on enrollment and student numbers, and then for transportation, building aid, BOCES services, textbook money, it's really based on direct expense related. So the million would go away.
Okay.
So we'd go from 38 million to 37, although it would be about 100,000 a year, because again, the million is not the first day. It's over that 7 to 13 years that we're paying on that mortgage.
And that's if the building's sold, not
That's if the
mothballed.
building's sold, right.
Mothballed.
Mothballed, we need to get more information on because it's a relatively new concept from the state. But that we will have more information hopefully very soon.
But you
the
said
state,
previously you had schools that theoretically could say, I had $1 million coming in aid in this building. It was costing me $1 million, let's say, to keep it going on staff. And other districts would say, okay, I'm going to mothball this building for $50,000, and now I just created an extra $950,000.
No, really, you didn't create an extra.
windfall,
You didn't lose it. Remember, you're not getting any more or any less unless you sell it, and then you're not going to get that aid.
Right, but
So,
like in this case here, you still had the students.
right.
And like in this case here, if the building's sold, you lose that $1 million. If you
Well, what he
mothball
was
it,
saying,
you
though,
keep the $1 million.
Yes.
And your
keeps
operating
coming
cost
in.
for that building itself goes from
Right.
roughly $1 million
But
down
the
to
million,
$50,000.
remember the million, because we mothballed it, we're still paying the mortgage.
Yeah.
And we have no other cash to pay the mortgage. So it still exists. That $1 million cost, which is about $100,000 a year, is on top of what we already pay. It's there, it exists.
It's like if your summer home, if you're not going to go there, you still have to
summer
pay
home?
on your summer home. You still have to pay the mortgage. So if someone else is helping you pay your mortgage,
I'm still living in my summer.
yeah, right.
I live in it, it's my summer home, my winter home.
We're getting basically a rent subsidy, and we're still going to get the rent subsidy if we mothball it. If we sell it, we'll no longer get the rent subsidy. But if we don't sell it, mothball it, we think we're going to get it, right? So it's not going to we're not going to profit off it. We're not going to mothball every school in the district and
Right.
make a lot of money.
Yeah. They're not
Which,
gonna, they'd be making a phone call.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's not there's no windfall to us. It's just a matter of if you sell it and get some money, it will help offset that cost that we're going to lose in state aid. That's what you're looking at. That's the netting. So everything else continues. You still have to pay, and it's still going to be that $100,000 a year. So I can get into more and show it in more detail. It's probably something people are going to struggle with understanding. We struggle with why the state is doing that to us now when they didn't do it to us for the last 60 years. But as I said, there are very smart people in Albany who know a lot more than we do, who are trying to figure out ways to make their jobs and their careers a lot better.
Now, the only other question I had on that is, I know you mentioned that Dan's department you guys work closely together with it. I know security of students is a huge topic right now. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit as to things that maybe the police department does to help out, just so that kind of we know the way that
we have a little agreement with the police that there's certain things we don't talk about because they're really in our individual plans and our safety plans in our buildings. And to be honest with you, there's safety teams in every building, and the building people who are in the buildings are required to know them. And I'm sure Dan can support with some other information, but we work extremely close as far as information that you are familiar with, the predator information. We work very closely when an incident occurs and either we have done an investigation or they've done an investigation. They share when it does not violate their legal requirements, and we share under the same circumstances because we are separate entities with separate, and I hate to say separate laws, but maybe rules is the better term to use because there's student discipline issues that we have to handle differently than the police officer might do under the same exact circumstances. And when they come together, we work together. They are involved in our safety committees. They understand and see the safety plans. We've been working, and we haven't completed it yet, but I know we work with sharing our technology so that they can see some of it. I don't know that we've gotten that finished yet, but that's something Scott and I know Dan we've talked about. I was involved in those discussions. We're just not there yet, but it's a very high level of support, recognizing too that we have very different responsibilities to the community, but they cross on safety and security at the highest level. So Dan, I welcome anything you want to add to that. I tried to dance as fast as I could, but
That was
It's kinda
pretty
like-
eloquent. I don't know if I could outdo that.
no, most people could.
It's kind of like on the news, when they give you way too much information, we don't want to give way too much information for the community to know how everything is run, right?
Right.
And that's the way it should be.
Exactly. We come from different disciplines. We have to treat our collective clients in different manners and to get the best results for the community. And, you know, as Brian said, we work, we share information. A lot of it is sensitive, some of it's classified, and this isn't the venue to get into that.
Thank you. I think we're up to question 10, and that's regarding available space for special area teachers. We've made every effort since the early 2003 capital project that every individual providing clear services to a student will have a space, whether it's OT, PT, social work, counseling, classroom teachers. Right now, we're having a little bit of problems at West Middle because we do have a few teachers in some disciplines on carts. That is not our preferred way. I will tell you that we used to do that a lot in the 90s. We do strongly believe in the need to provide the appropriate space, and we will not compromise that in any plan that we ultimately agree to. Our staff, a student deserves to have a confidential area if they're in a counseling or in a therapy situation, and teachers certainly need to have the appropriate space for preparation and services that they provide to students. So I assure you that every effort would be made to provide the appropriate level of space, and I know that's part of what Joe and I are working on right now as we look at evaluating all of our space, looking at the state guidelines and seeing what can and what can't be done with what space we have. And we do that, we actually have to do that every 5 years on the building condition survey, and that has been done every year in all the every period over the last 25 years. And we did a rather large one in the 2003-2006 era when we were doing the significant building improvements we did in the $38 million project. That's when we did a very large amount of changes. We also added space despite declining enrollment in some locations to meet those needs in at least 3 buildings, East Middle, East Elementary at the time, and Allendale. And we also provided some other space in Clinton and Potter, although they were much smaller, and they were an attempt to provide some additional gathering or grouping areas in those 2 locations. They weren't necessarily as specific. So that's something that's important to us as we look at our facilities. One of the things that I have meant to say almost from the beginning is that as I talk to Lisa and Ed, and as I hear tonight, and I look at some of the issues that may evolve, and some of them based on an earlier question about the middle school and the high school, which we're not at a point right now to really discuss at any length the consolidation down to a 1 building, although Pat and I both know because we've had some discussion internally about possibilities. But I think you would hear from Dr. Crawford, and I would share that there's a threshold issue that we have with numbers of students. If you combine the high schools now, you'd be looking at 2,300 or 2,400 students. Same with the middle schools. That may require so much additional support in the form of administrative or secure environment that we don't think it's the appropriate threshold. I would suggest that perhaps you put that on hold for a future group, and that's part of the reason I mentioned that in 2021 you'll be around 6,200 students potentially. You still may be waiting till below 6, but in 6 or 7 years, I think there may be a need for another discussion, as there may be another discussion needed if our enrollment continues to drop at elementary, particularly kindergarten, in 5 years. I wouldn't try to think that you're going to do at this group, or what we'll do administratively or the board legally, is going to solve this forever. And I say that going back to what some of my opening remarks. We have reconfigured at least 4 times in the 25 years I've been here. And it's gone from not using this building to now it being, at one point, a fully functional K through 6, and now it's a K through 5. And I don't doubt that there'll be changes, as Ian will tell you that at State Ed they're always thinking of something new, of what grade grouping kids should be, and what's the flavor of the month type of thing that comes up. But I would really try to focus on meeting those needs to try to meet your bigger needs, which is what we want to have for our community and how do we best try to reach that. So you may want to have a number of recommendations, but some of them may be a future group looks at this 7 years from now, as opposed to spending a lot of time on that now.
With all due respect on that, one of the major things that we get from the community is they want to start working on a long-term plan now. Whether it takes 7 years to accomplish, that's one thing, but we do want to start researching it. The reason why it's been brought up now is we want to, I want to apologize to fellow people from Winchester here. We want to begin with the end in mind. If we know in 7 to 10 years our goal is to be down to 1 high school, we want to work backwards and make sure we're not doing the wrong thing now, say closing the wrong building or redistricting in the wrong way, which is going to affect the future. We're not implying that that needs to happen this year and that needs to happen in the next 2 months, but it's just something we want to make sure we have on the table for, say, the next committee that forms. We want to have the information there. We want to be more prepared, because the biggest complaint that I get from people is not, we're closing a building, we're redistricting. It's, I'm sick of every year it seems like we're just working on this year's problems. They want to start planning for the future a little more as parents in the community. So that's the only reason we brought it up as a subcommittee, not to stir.
I don't think you're saying anything different than what I just said.
Yeah.
In many respects, I don't know that how in depth you want to go now.
Right.
I would suggest that you may have several things, even like the class size, that you might say lower class size might be something you want to investigate, and perhaps a committee should be looked at and start looking at it when the resources are available to do it. And I think you would say the same thing with the consolidation further at the middle and the high school. It's something that is a great idea. It's something that could very well happen if you continue to look at enrollment. But I think you have to prioritize your time and efforts as to what level of detail and information that you want and when you want to start accumulating it. Because I'll guarantee 7 years from now, it'll be like if I look back 7 years ago when we were getting all sorts of state aid and we didn't think there was ever going to be a problem. So we were hiring literacy specialists, we were talking about lower class sizes and lower targets, and then all of a sudden the rug was pulled out from underneath us. So there are other issues. It's not something that I don't think we should talk about, because I know Pat and I have had extensive discussions with the other central office people about that exactly. Right. And because I think you do have to be prepared at what level, but I think as a group you have to decide how much effort is put into that in its depth, as opposed to it is a practical future solution. And at what point in time do you start getting more information that's practical to that time? Because I would guarantee you 7 years from now, stuff that we write down tonight, people are going to say you're nuts. Just like when we changed the Union Road thing 15 or 16 years ago, people will say, oh, you're going back to where you were. Now you want to go back to Union Road. Well, that's what happens, because the last time I checked, the kids don't come from the same house every year for every decade that we have, and we don't seem to be able to figure out closely enough when those shifts occur and how they're going to occur. And I think that's why, to some degree, we talk about when we do this, you have to leave yourself some flexibility within the buildings as you end them up, to be able to absorb some minor changes. You don't want to say, oh, well, we could put 500 kids at this building, so let's put 500 kids there. You don't do that. You look at your group of buildings that you're going to have, and you try to find a good mix that will get you some flexibility. Because, and I hate to say it, because when I think about what we've come through all these years, and I think about the stands that we took about how this was going to be great, and now I look back and we're doing the same thing all over again. And I don't know any place that doesn't go through it. And the primary example could be a comparable sized district like Kenton, what they're going through right now. I mean, they're going through some monumental changes because of the same types of shifts. And they've had that discussion about one middle school, one high school. So those things are going on. I don't discount them. I just am suggesting for the group that the term prioritization of emphasis of time and effort and you know, massing of information to get certain targets completed.
Right.
And that's really just, I guess that's part of my planning. That's the way I do it. When I'm doing stuff on a year-to-year or month-to-month, it's prioritization, maximization, knowing also that we are always talking about these other things. And we want to, I think what we're trying to do is make sure the community knows that there is dialogue. Even the question on security. I hope people, if they hear what we briefly tried to say, they understand that there's a great relationship between the police and the school district for the safety and the benefit of the kids that go here. I hope everybody gets that.
I hope you didn't think that I wanted
No,
to
no, I didn't, Brian.
I
was just re-emphasizing it. I'm just re-emphasizing it as an important issue.
A good relationship between the two, and so that people have a good comfort level.
And that has taken.
I don't
that has
want
taken.
the whole line by line what you guys share. I don't care about that.
Brian, that
has taken the better part of 20 years to develop.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's been a long-term goal between the police department and the school district, going back to the days when I still had black hair and Mark Crawford was the principal in Northwood, and we started working together. And you know, to defend the school district too, they don't go year to year. They've done a phenomenal job of long-term planning with capital projects and bus improvement and the special funding they've done. So we have the luxury of sitting in a group like this to talk about issues today that aren't, it's on the stress level, but it ain't Kenton. It ain't, to use an educational term, draconian. You know, and
write that down.
Can you spell that?
Spell check.
Well, but we want to get back to the questions.
But really, what Brian has stressed here, you know, when you talk about the governmental agencies between the town government and the school district, there are a lot of people who are in our community that don't separate the two. You know, and they are separate entities with somewhat different agendas, but so closely paired that, you know, and that's all facets of town government. I mean, that's just not the police. I mean, this whole thing with the emergency operations, that isn't strictly the police. That's fire agencies, that's town government, that's school district coming together to do plans so committees like this can now think to the future, not too far out. So they've done a fantastic job with their financial plans. So we're really not going under, but we see problems.
Can you elaborate more on the Kenton thing? If you guys mentioned it as far as
at the last I heard, they're looking at 4 buildings and sites, and they have their model. I think had 3 middle schools, and I don't know how many elementary, and the 2 high schools. And I believe they're looking at consolidation of that could eliminate 1 middle and I think 3 elementary, 2 or 3. I mean, and they're actually at one time they were bigger than us by a significant amount, and they very rapidly have lost, even faster than we did, enrollment. And they're struggling with the same things we are. And you know, I was going to say something earlier, Brian. Your question brings me back to that thought I had about coming into this meeting. We're not alone. Kenton's doing it. Buffalo has done it for years. If you look at some side stories, like in the paper yesterday, Pine Valley is exercising a choice not to have football this fall. And Holland, I don't know if they ever restarted their football program. Other districts are finding the need to do things. And I think you will see further constriction because other than in the last information that I saw in the paper regarding enrollment, I think Buffalo and Amherst Central were the only 2 school districts where their enrollment was increasing. All other districts in Western New York were decreasing. And that is also really the story of New York State. That is also why the state decided that this plan of mothballing and taking the money back, because they realized that there has been a shift, and it's not just that people are leaving the area. Parents are choosing not to have kids, or having kids later in life, or adopting, or having only one or two. You know, so there's been a significant change in the environment that we were used to, and some of us that are the white hairs, who, when we grew up, the family down the street having 9 kids, you know, that was where everybody partied, you know, and there was a different environment. And I think what we're seeing and what we're reacting to in this group is a sociological change in families and movement of families. It's not, I don't, and I appreciate what Dan said, I don't think it's anything anybody has done wrong. I think when all these buildings were built and these needs were provided, we all thought that these were the things that, you know, we were going to have for a long time. And I think that's why you have to put some thought into it. And before you do say we're going to sell a building, you know, you can take some intermediary steps like mothballing for a short period of time until you get a feel for what's going to happen. And then you make a decision to market. Now, if somebody comes and knocks on our door and says, we've got a $2 million check here for you, you know, we'll be listening. But if they're going to offer us $3,575 for any of our buildings, I don't think we probably have to stop me from pick me up off the floor from rolling around laughing. But I think we look at these things one thing I always, and I appreciate Dan saying what he did. I've worked in this a long time, and Dan said something earlier that of the broad brush of how professionals and institutions are painted when something goes wrong. Most school districts, and I believe including us, are struggling with this right now. And it isn't because anything we've done other than the environment has changed. We've been willing to recognize it. And the good thing that we're trying to do, and I appreciate you as a group, is talk about it as citizens and provide feedback, because decisions will have to be made. And people are going to say, well, did anybody talk to anybody about this? And you don't always have a chance to have this, and I think that's important. And I think a long-term plan of that type of communication is critical to continue the bond and to continue the growth and change. Because as Joe Farr said to me the other day when he drew this diagram for me, and he said, a lot of people don't know anything that you've done over and what we've done as a district over the last 25 years. They don't care. And you know what? Well, if each one of you said, I don't care what you did the last 25 years, it wouldn't bother me. Because I'm really more worried about the next 5 and the next 10. The last 25, there is not a damn thing I can do about them. They're done. And I only tell you that so that you know we've had some practice at doing this. And Joe is tired of moving furniture around and doing stuff and building, but we know that that's what we do. And we have skilled people that do that stuff. I think we've moved on. We're getting close to the end.
I will say what is good, though, I think that for all of us here, I think we all see developments in Lancaster. Houses going up in Lancaster all the time, so everyone just assumes, well, Lancaster School doesn't have any issues. But when you sit there and say that, you know, they're not one of the 2 that are seeing increasing enrollment, well, that tells me something, too, from I just automatically assumed all these houses going up in Lancaster, well, their enrollment has to be going up along with it, but it's not, which
Lancaster and Clarence for a while were on a growth curve, but that has leveled off. Yeah, that Lancaster and Clarence for a while were among the growth communities, but that's no longer the case.
But also, and I've said this before, manufacturing businesses, that's what we need more of to help out the school district, as opposed to people having kids. I mean, you got idiots like me who have 5 kids. We're costing the district money. He asked me to move when he found out I was having twins.
I offered to pay him. You know.
The biggest thing the community needs to realize is we really need to build more business. I mean, we've got, you know, you've got other towns that, like Lancaster is a great business community, manufacturing, all that. That goes towards school taxes, and there's no kids coming out of those factories, you know, being born there, so it helps that out a lot. So that's another big factor. If we can fill up,
work in Lancaster and have their kids here.
We can fill up Commercial Parkway, that sort of thing. That's obviously a goal to keep in mind.
Question number 11 is regarding transportation and start times. Again, it's hard to be specific when you don't have a specific one on. But our transportation crew, from a routing standpoint, is very good. Every child is offered transportation now, and we anticipate, barring some suggestion from this group, that we maintain that transportation. And again, when you talk about mandates, we are still one of the easiest districts to get transportation from for short distances. Many districts go to the mile and a half, 2 mile requirement, and Kevin Love, who I think has worked with you on a couple occasions, could tell you more about that. But we transport those students now, we would transport them then, and we would fit them within. If you think start time should change at some point, you should make a recommendation. And I'll tell you, that's part of that process of, there are studies that show high school kids do better later in the day and elementary do better earlier in the day. But I'm sure some football coaches would be concerned about that because it might disrupt practices. But other districts that have that work it out. So I think that's something to consider. I would assure you that kids would be delivered. Any start time change would really, I'd be speculating, and I don't want to get into that because I don't know to where or to who. We do have a pretty well established who's the early schools, who's the middle schools, who's the late schools, and that information is easily provided by Kevin.
Yeah, I think we'll get that over to Kevin, because I think where that question came from was if, say, Potters were to close, they're an early school, Winchester is, I don't even know the difference. I guess there's a different start time for each school. So we were just wondering how that affects the plan, because it seems like certain schools we're looking at, it would screw things up. So we'll get that over to Kevin.
Yeah, I think, again, it depends on where we would end up sending any kids from that building that will not be named by me to another building that will not be named by me, because we don't know what the building is. And I think that's really what the routing stuff is really another inside baseball thing.
Yeah.
When we know, we can tell you every child, and we can tell you what we would need in the form of perhaps an additional bus, because there might be more kids that have to be on the middle run as opposed to the early run or the late run, and we have that information. Kathy Rupert's also familiar with it because next week is the routing day.
No, it was today.
Oh, today was? Oh, I missed that. I was busy today, and that's always a fun day down in transportation. But I do think that people want to know, and they want to know well in advance. Are my kids going to have to come in at 7 a.m. or 9:30? And we're very sensitive to that, and we will make sure that that's, fully vetted in the process. Any other questions?
I do have a question, kind of an offshoot of transportation there. The transportation state aid, does it, I don't know how I put this, if we have to take the west of the West Seneca town to ship them to the east of town, does it increase? Or
one of the best things that happened with what we did in January of a year and a half ago was we added aid at about 4%, I believe it was, Jan. Because what they call is the non-allowable decimal usage of transportation. Those students who are under a mile are not eatable.
Okay.
So if that student now, because of the closure of a building, is driving more than a mile, it's now eatable. Okay. And as you contract your elementary buildings, you would create more aid.
Okay.
I mean, we're not talking about
right.
King's ransom, but it would be a positive thing, and that's what would help us meet the need.
Okay.
Is there would be aid available to do that.
Okay, I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Number 12, regarding community ed. One of our concerns in the community ed area is that if we were to do more, I don't know if parents would want us to put them in buildings where children are. If we had a facility where there was no students, we might be more amenable to do it. I mean, that would be something we could provide. But we also are very sensitive to competing with the senior center, the YMCA, and those programs that exist right now. We've generally been the evening, weekend location for adults who want to have continuing education opportunities. And we've, other than the swimming that we've had for certain groups early in the morning or late in the day, we've really tried not to have that conflict of non-student, non-parent activity going through, despite the fact that many of them are grandparents. But it's something we're sensitive to. We would listen to it. I know our community ed people would be glad to have a facility, and if something were available, that would be something that we might use some of that space for. Actually, the state is supporting reuse of facilities, not just mothballing. Reuse is another thing, but reuse infers an awful lot of different things that you got to go through process-wise. But that's something we could get more information on. Joe's working on that with the people from state aid because it's so new to them, and there's so many new state aid people that are down there now since a lot of them left the current leadership there.
There's no aid for the community yet, right?
No, and it's largely paid for out of the tuition collected by those people, so it's largely a break even for us. And actually our larger program now is the early morning, late afternoon, after school, before school program we provide for our elementary level kids at all of our elementary buildings. I believe all of our elementary buildings. Mm-hmm. And that has become a bigger ticket for the parents because many of them, like I had, and I'm sure many of you, I didn't have the luxury at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get out of work and go home to my kids. So having a daycare setting in the school for many of them has been a perfect way, you know, to ensure safety of their child. And we embraced it maybe 5 years ago or more, and it is now runs more income-wise and cost-wise, but at a break-even level than the continuing ed, just because it's something that we have a captive audience of people that really want that service, and most people have been very satisfied.
It also provides an opportunity for our students who are interested in pursuing careers in education, an opportunity to be able to work with kids and that kind of settings, and they plan out what the kids are going to be doing, and they execute it, and that gives them a chance to be able to assess their skills and develop whether or not, in fact, education is where they want to spend their careers, and so they can relate to a number of different kids at a number of different ages, and it's really a win-win for a lot of different people to have that program in place.
I'm resisting the Carnac thing about the last question, so I'll try to play a straight line instead. What does it cost to run these specific programs? Modified sports, $236,068. 236,068. The music program, $2,402,036. 2,402,036.
Is that across the district?
Yes.
K-12.
K-12. And the last one was kindergarten, $2,519,723. I think we got your questions as best we could.
Fabulous. You did a great job.
I would really ask you that if there's something you want more detail-wise, again, send me an email or Jan an email, or Pat certainly, or Ann, and we'll get more detailed information for you. This was all, as you know, done over the last 2 or 3 days, and will certainly be vetted as we get more close to public meetings, but I don't know if you're going to get much difference. I prefer when we get to the bigger public settings to use round numbers. When I start saying, and right. I didn't put the pennies on for obvious reasons, but I think people begin, I promised the group up here that I would say this in the beginning, and I didn't, so I'll say it at the end. Everything we do, everything we've done, numbers-wise, is projections, estimations of what would happen in 15-16, based on 15-16 costs. It's all projections, it's all estimations, And that means it's always subject to whatever else happens out there.
Right.
And I think that's, I know somebody once said, well, you said it was gonna be this. And what they didn't hear me say is it's a projection, it's an estimate, it's an about. You know, and I think I wanna make sure people know, we're pretty good with our estimates and projections. We're in the ballpark. We feel very comfortable about, for example, the answer to question number 1 with a generic building, because between Pat and Jan and I, we sat down very closely to talk about what would really be duplicate and therefore not as not necessary. And we did, because the question was asked, and again, I want to go back to it too. The potential for layoffs do exist, and we're not doing this, I guess, on a legal notice for the units, but that could occur. But as I said to someone else yesterday, that doesn't mean that other things might not come up between now and whenever we start a plan, that we may have found ways to mitigate that. Whether it's for further discussions or other plans. I know our superintendent and our board is very sensitive to the word layoff. We've not laid off since we laid off, I believe, a teaching assistant back in 2010.
The teacher or teaching assistant.
Yeah.
And
So
we did lay off some teaching assistants.
yeah. So we are very aware of that impact. And we do know that in an organization with 1,000 or more people, there are some other ways that you can reduce your costs without necessarily laying people off. And I'll let your imaginations run on that, because that's what I do.
What I'm going to do, I just want to, especially, I mean, now that we're more acutely aware that there's people watching at home, I've been working on product placement to help out a little. What we did it to this point was we looked at information based on population. We didn't concern ourselves with the proposals we've had with numbers, with dollar amounts, with whether closing a building will save us money. We're just looking at how are we going to get population to fit lesser buildings. So now that we've added another whole aspect, we're going to go back and research some of these proposals we've had, and some more proposals have come across. So that's why I know it makes you uncomfortable to have specific questions for specific buildings, but that's why we were asking them, because we want to know how do the numbers apply to ideas we've had so far. Now, obviously, I'm sure everyone's head, spinning in the room, and there are a ton more ideas, ton more ways to do it. And this thing we're working on now, whether it's closing buildings, whether it's redistricting, whether it's saving money, is only the first step in a lot of the things that we're looking at as far as how to save money other ways, which are more positive. So I just know we've been kind of working on this aspect because of the timeline that we have. We don't want it just to pop up and have it happen in a year. But I mean, there's lots of lots of more different subcommittees we're going to have in different groups of saving money, whether it's, positive things, again, different usage of things. So I just want you to want to know why we had specific questions. It's to then apply them to proposals that we've already had submitted by the committee, and not because we have, just only one idea in mind. We just need to research the different ideas. We based it on people. Now we're going to take all these numbers and go back and start researching it that way.
Those teachers' assistants, weren't they hired back in the past couple of years?
Some have been hired back. There's still some people on deferred eligibility. This was a teacher that's on deferred eligibility. Like there are some teaching assistants that are still on deferred eligibility. Kathy's less than 5.
I think we appreciate every opportunity we can to speak with this group and the community. I think one of the things that I want to ask the group as we get into meetings, whether it's the meetings that you've scheduled or if there are meetings in the future, to try to measure for us the depth of what we have to provide people from the scenarios of what's happened to us over the last 5 years. Many in this room probably are sick of hearing Brian Schulz or Pat Phelan or Dr. Crawford talk about the problems with state aid and $34,853,000 in held back state aid. But there are also many people that are going to wake up on that morning, as Joe Farr mentioned to me, and they're going to say, what happened? And I guess we need to know, so that the community can come along in this decision, is how how much do we need to share, and how do we need to share it? Because it could be in a written form, a letter to the community, it could be in the presentations, it could be information that we provide on a website. You know, so I think we need to think about different ways that you can help us with that part, because, you know, Pat and I, who have been really at some of the heart of the stuff the last 4 or 5 years, we know it, we live it, we lived it, we want to be over it, quite frankly, folks. But many people, you know, I had a person in our building that when we took a step a couple weeks ago to free spending said, I thought the problem was over. And I said, well, I felt like I was in a Seinfeld episode. Well, that problem was over, but there's this other problem. And the other problem is enrollment. And as the units knew from a meeting we had with them recently, it's also, we've exhausted our fund balance to get to today. So we have very little resources of the extra money because we've expensed that. We have enrollment dropping. And now, thanks to your thought process, we're looking at a plan that will help us meet the facilities we need so the students can have the best opportunity within the school district. That's what we're trying to marry and put together.
I think part of what needs to be part of that presentation, and it's keeping in line with the idea that people really don't take notice of what's going on in the district until there is a problem, or until something has the possibility of being taken away. They need to know your silver bullet moments. You know, we went around and we talked about what we value. I think the public needs to know what you as administrators value. What mandates you put into place that might not be state mandated, but what you value in terms of keeping our schools safe, in terms of keeping programs intact that we still have.
We could work on that. I do know that each administrator probably has a different.
Well, I think one of the things I was going to comment on.
That's part of the leadership.
Sure. I will tell you that, and Brian certainly alluded to the fact that we've been working on it, but it's been just more than just Brian and I, and I'm just going to acknowledge Kathy and Joe. And this is one of the things that we value is the relationship that we have with Kathy and Joe and all of our employees, because it's just not what we do up here as administrators, but what happens, we have between 570 or so 560 teachers, and we have around 500 folks that are with CSEA. Overall employees, I think Jan can tell you when she processes the W-2s at the end of the year, we have near 1,700 people that are employed by West Seneca. I think Lisa the other day was mentioning this is a significant business that we have here, and it's a significant business that's really so valuable to the 6,700 students we have. I mean, you just can't put a price. It's so difficult sometimes to put a dollar on some of these things, but you have to because of the cost of it. But certainly, I guess my point is one of the things that we really truly value is each and every one of the staff members and faculty that play a role in the education of our children, that we continually want to get input from them as well as to how we can best be able to provide the leadership necessary to accomplish our mission.
I think one of the things too is that the administration and the school board has done over the past 5 years a really good job of many of the cuts that they've made we're not aware of per se because they've happened in the behind the scenes. So they haven't actually been something that, you know, we can actually necessarily have noticed. You know, we talked about with Joe at the beginning how his department has taken huge hits. Kathy has mentioned, you know, how we've taken hits through the CSE. We talked about the incentive for people to leave, and you know, so we're aware of some of those things, but I think maybe having, you know, this is what we've done already in the past 5 years, bullet, 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 to try to alleviate as much as we possibly could. But eventually, is that what you eventually, you know, it comes to the point where what else do we have to do? It's not enough. And we value, you know, we've talked about what do we value? We value those programs. We value the music, we value the arts, we value the athletics, we value the AP classes, we value kindergarten. You know, those are all things that we keep talking about that we value. So do we value bricks and mortar, or do we value program?
I think the hardest part, respecting the questions on values, is as a decision maker, is prioritization and understanding limitations of resources, and trying to match valuations and community. That's why we want to hear more from the community than we want to hear from us, because in many respects, Lisa, you're right on. We've already made some of those choices. I mean, whether it was by closing the ALC, East Elementary, the high school summer school, the elementary summer school, not replacing computers for 4 years, doing less with BOCES and special needs and career and technical education, whether it was consolidating bus routes or closing a building on weekends and some nights during the week, which I know some of you were working on. I mean, we've tried to prioritize already, and I think that is even harder for a group. I mean, I can tell you, if you ask the administrators, we have a ton of stuff we value. I'll tell you what I value at this point. If somebody said I like lower class size, and I said I like more money. Not for me. I want more money for the district, and we don't have more money. So that's the tight part in the valuation. But I assure you, we can provide in a matching way, in a supportive way. As Ann, that's why I think Ann asked for that information, is so she can match that up with work she's doing right now, and we can find common ground. And then when you have the common ground, then you get into the prioritization piece. Okay, y'all said your number one thing was iPads, but I don't know if that was your number one need. I think that's the number one thing on the list.
Right.
Is it AP? Is it music and art? I think that's one of the things that would be helpful for us as we commingle values, is prioritization. Because that's the only way you ultimately work down wish lists. Because there will be a point in time, despite all the savings we can get, there may be a point in time where we say, well, the lower class size may have to wait a while. But if we know that that's less important than something else, we can work on that. And we can, you know, in telling you the things I just told you, you can see we've been pretty careful in how we've looked at it and how we've worked through those. And the things we went through, Pat, when we met with the different groups, we've worked very closely with Joe and the teachers on the summer school piece and credit recovery. Because even though the program went away for summer school, I think everybody recognized the need to meet graduation requirements. There was something that had to be done so the kids could get credit, so they could matriculate, if I said that right. So I think you have to try to find, there's a yin and a yang even in that process. And I think we've been pretty good at navigating at different levels, working with our groups and working with the community. But I also go back to my question when I raise it is, when we get into those meetings, how many people do you think are going to ask us to go back to the beginning? How did this all happen? And how do we feel there's a way we can shortcut that so we can get more to what I think you all are ready to want to get to? Because I find myself a lot of times impatient when I'm working through a decision model and I've already see what the decision is. I get real impatient.
But I think the background knowledge makes sense. I think that, you know, it's the background knowledge kind of sets us to the tone of where we are now. And I'm not saying that we have to spend a huge amount of time, but I think that by giving them the background knowledge, hopefully that will allow them to see where we've come. And I know we've talked as a commission about, you know, how much time we spent on our values. I mean, we were valued, we spent a lot of time on that, but now as we come back, it's easy to say, but remember what we said we valued. Yes, I think the prioritizing them is a great idea, but at least we've got them down on paper at this point and we can refer back to them. And, you know, it makes that, that background knowledge is there. And I think for this, I think there's a lot of people that don't realize what you know, the magic that you've tried to work for the past 5 years, because that's really what it is. It's a lot of magic that's been going on.
Well, and one of my thoughts that I'd like you to consider is, do we develop a pamphlet or a program that would be at the public hearings and available that might provide some of that more detailed information so that we don't get bogged down in the mess. But if somebody wants to read it at that point in time, we just do a summary report of what happened. How did we get here? What are the factors?
Because
So, I mean,
they
if you
need to
can think of the
realize
types of
that
things
it
you want in
wasn't
that,
us,
it'd be
it
great.
wasn't you, and you know, you didn't do something that put us in this situation. I think that's important for people to realize. It wasn't anything, it wasn't mishandling of funds, or it wasn't making crazy choices or anything like that. I mean, this was none of that. This came from, you know.
It's being really driven, as Brian said earlier on, enrollment. You know, enrollment, and just, I'm going to say myself, I came here in 99, we had over 8,000 students in 89, and now we're down to 6,700, and Brian, I think, alluded to the fact that we're funding was somewhere around 6,200 in 7 years, and probably within 10 years, we're below 6,000. Yeah. And so I think that that's driving a lot of it. Yeah.
I think, you know, you're talking about putting together a pamphlet. When we closed East Elementary, we did exactly that. All those same things were brought up that we did, and yes, people have forgotten. But I think we also need to remember not to just be able to get to our households with children. We have to get to our households without children. Yep. Not just our seniors, our households without children. Like you said, Lancaster's building up all these new homes. Many of them don't have children. So
that's a really good point,
we
Kathy.
need to not just get to our parents who have children in school. Of course they care. We have to also get through to the entire community that this is what's going on, so that they also understand.
So a whole community.
I think that's a
so.
statistic you probably share.
I mean, they're all
78% of our
taxpayers.
community does not have students in our school.
78%.
78%.
Right, we talked about that. Right.
I've said it before, and it falls in place now. To a great degree, we will not be judged in what programs we save, but we will be judged in what money we saved.
By the seniors.
Eric, and then
What I would recommend is, as you're putting this together, is to constantly relate it in your presentation, maybe not so much in literature, relate it back to the mission of the district. And, you know, kind of keep pointing to that, because every decision you're making is, you know, with respect to the mission and the goal of the school district. I'm in a similar environment as you're in right now, you know, and I also come from an environment where I have very, very good decision makers who, those who are from looking on the outside in, they don't see all of the great things you're doing to keep all of the programs there. And by saying, you know, we cut this, but save this because we value, you know, because the mission says we do this. By directing those things and having your message marketed, it shows a consistent message, but it also shows that that's exactly what you're doing. And you're not grasping at straws, because it's exactly what you're doing. You're saving the mission, which is ensuring that our students have the programs and activities that they've always had, and, you know, we're working hard to ensure we have that. So that's probably one of the big things.
One of the things, Brian, I think that, you know, you had 25 years experience in this district, and I thought that your presentation tonight was very good. I hope people watch it on YouTube to see what you had to say. One of the things that I would like to see is that we as a committee stick together and we come to the school board with a unanimous decision, and that we save some of our programs, and that is Dan had proposed a while ago, but I think that would be very important for us to be unanimous, and you know, and that will be very hard. I mean,
we talked about that too, Joan, of, you know, as this group coming to a consensus, and that when we walk out that door, it's this group together. You know, we're not backstabbing one another's proposal. It's not about who did what or what did what. It's about, you know, what we're doing for the kids and what we're doing for, you know, the children in this community. I agree with
But
that.
I think if you're going to put something out, I thought, Brian, you had some very good ideas because you've been in the district a long time, and you know.
I certainly would be prepared to work with this group and anyone from your group to put together the appropriate information. I think that's critical to try to maximize getting to the message, as opposed to the diversions that easily. It was when Eric brought up the piece about the mission, I think back to our January meeting at East Elementary, and it really wasn't until the parents stood up and said, and read the mission statement about caring students that can adapt to change. And those words right there struck all of us, because the biggest problem is people weren't prepared to deal with change. And our mission statement is directed at we are trying to educate our students so that they're prepared to deal with change. Because as I tried to lay out earlier in my presentation, there's been nothing but change for 25 years. It's just that sometimes that change doesn't affect people. And I think it does relate to what we've become accustomed to individually receiving as services, whether it's garbage collection or a student being picked up in front of their house versus having to walk 5 houses down the street. We have to recognize it's trying to find those things that we can save. Transportation for our kids is important to save. Is it important to save it door-to-door service for every student? That's the prioritization piece. That's also, I think, where Dan got to his question earlier about mandated services. There's mandated that are mandated by law, but there's also mandated, as we've always observed, by the community's past practice of receiving. And that's why we really want, and we appreciate the community's feedback in this whole thing, because they may want to have every building open that was open back in 1978 when I first showed up in a West Seneca school building, but that's not what change is, and that's not adapting to change. That's rigidity. And I think this whole process is about change, adapting to change, recognizing that the change that we recommend will change too. And that's inevitable. And not feeling that we're not gonna hit that prime moment where everybody says, aha, we'll just build a big tent and every child of the district will go to the tent and they will stay there for their 13 years and we'll be done with all these problems. It's about change. And Eric, I'm glad again you brought up the mission statement, and that's something that many people, when they come to these presentations, when we have meetings of any level, they're not prepared for other people's change. They're ready for what they are willing to accept, but they're not prepared for change. And that's a big educational process, because quite frankly, and Dan, you know that from the services you provide, that's the real reason a lot of things happen that you have to deal with. People couldn't cope with something that has changed, and now they can't text when they're driving or play with their phone, or maybe they can't go a certain speed. People don't want to put their seatbelt. I mean, these are all things that are being done for our good, but people just don't want to adapt to change. And I think those pieces with the mission statement and trying to find that and have that goodwill, it will be the hardest thing for this group to ultimately sell. And I'm glad you're saying you'd like it to be unanimous, because I think there's nothing more than that type of power of the community people already supporting it at some level. Because we will have a lot of people who want it to be studied at their level at their time and have it impact at their beneficial time. And quite frankly, that's not how usually decisions are made, and that's not how it usually occurs. You're dealt the stuff that you're dealt, and you're meant to deal with the stuff that you're dealt. And when you don't, then I think you're not doing your job. And I think that's why we're all here in this room tonight. We see a need, and we have to coalesce around a solution to that need. And I, on behalf of the group here, really appreciate the amount of time you've put in and the amount of time you will put in, and the criticism you will receive, or what you think to be criticism, or questioning, because that's a hard part of this process, the whole questioning piece. And I'll tell you, having done it for this many years, when I sat up in that meeting in January, people were questioning what we're doing, and I'm sitting there going, why don't they get what I know? And that's what everybody has to remember, is that everyone doesn't get what I or you know. They get what they know. And our job is to communicate and share information to the level necessary to bring people together.
I think a tribute to the community too, just going back to the whole East Elementary experience, there was a lot of anxiety in January, a lot of stress, and just the whole grieving process that really took place. But the community worked with us, and I'll tell you, both the associations worked with us. Joe and I spent probably more time together than we spent with our families in terms of making sure that the best possible where there could be a smooth transition. And I'll tell you, in September of 2013, it was a smooth transition, or smoother, and I would say primarily the students from East Elementary were at Clinton Street, and just seemed to kind of seamlessly get into it, as well as the faculty and the staff that was spread out throughout the organization. And it was a tribute to the people in the community that came together, that trusted us, that we were making the right decision. So I'd just like to join Brian and congratulate each and every one of you, both personally and collectively, for the work that you're doing. We've had a chance to be able to see the mission statement that you put together for what you're all about in this process, and this is critical. It's critical to the community, or more significantly, it's critical to the students that we all serve. So thank you very much for all your time and your effort in putting yourselves in, really putting it in yourself in a very special way to service the community.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions? Because I know it's getting late and we don't want to, people will be back here early. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead, Brian.
I've heard a lot about ranking our wants in the U.S. for, and Lisa, I heard you say that as well. Would it be something that we would want to look at, of having everybody here rank them? What I can do is I can look at
email them to Brian.
SurveyMonkey. The SurveyMonkey will allow people to do it anonymously.
Must be the name Brian. Brian Graham, Brian Janik at SurveyMonkey.
And I believe it's also it's anonymous, and they'll do all the tallies for us. Because I want to sit here with pieces of paper adding them up. Is that something that
I think that's a great idea. I think that's a really good idea. It'd be a great way to put it all together.
I'll look into it and take exactly what our wants are in each of these pages and create it, and then people just have to rank it 1 through whatever it is, and then we can figure out where it is for everybody.
I have more of those too. If anybody didn't get one, I do have.
Brian, we might also need to agree on the wording of our wants.
I think we did.
So that it can be understood pretty similarly by everyone.
I would take them right off our sheet.
Okay, I don't have that in front of me.
Well, how dare you come unprepared?
Is that something tonight?
While we're watching Bob get his sheet, big question I'm getting constantly: why do we care if the 5th grade is going in the middle school at West Middle? Like, that's one of our goals as this committee, is to get 5th grade into West Middle.
So what are the benefits?
So people are asking me, well, it's basically, it's one of our, we decided there was a couple things that had to happen in every proposal. One, district offices are out of here. We don't know where they're going, but they're out of here. Maybe the parking lot, whatever. But 2, get the 5th grade into West Middle. I do not know how to answer that other than that's what they want. Like, what would be, why? I know it's because the 5th grade's at East Middle, but then the response is, well, then why don't you just take it out?
Yeah, so what's developmentally, from a learning perspective, what do you see differences? And we had one anecdotal difference that Holly gave us, in terms of the programs and offerings, but that was actually the one question I was going to ask.
Well, thank you.
We're on the same page.
We are. You sound much smarter than me.
Not really.
So I would say, no matter where a particular grade level lies, every student's getting a West Seneca education. So that is sort of a done deal. We have tried to really foster continuity as across grade levels, in terms of materials, in terms of curriculum, in terms of professional development, so that we know that your students are receiving an equitable education. But there are some benefits to moving students into that configuration. Besides the equity issue, so that both sides of town are receiving the same, program, I guess you could say. Number one, I would say there's a lot of research that has shown that puberty has actually started significantly earlier than it did 100 years ago when some of these models were designed in the old system. So it's actually about 2 years. It's moved down about 2 years from where it used to be. So they were really looking at a 10 to 14-year-olds as having a lot more in common than they might have had in the past. So moving to a 5 to 8 model allows a K to 4 building to focus on the needs of the younger children, and then grouping the adolescents together and focusing on those needs as well in a 5 to 8 configuration is a benefit. 5 to 8 allows you to have sort of an upper and a lower school together, so you can cluster the 5th and 6th grades and the 7th and 8th grades. So you're really meeting the needs of both of those groups. Focusing the teachers on adolescent needs, because not just puberty, but in general, that age group has a lot of concerns and questions, and they're learning about themselves, and they have more in common at that age than a 5th grader would with a 4th grader. And if you have kids in that age group, you probably already know this. So that's one of the arguments that has been put forth by a lot of different groups, that it makes sense to cluster students together that way, so that the teachers can focus on the needs of that particular age group.
And is that coming down from state ed at this point? Are they making that recommendation also?
So back in, I think, '89, they originally made a similar recommendation, and then in 2003 they renewed it. They said they grouped 10 to 14-year-olds together, grade configuration 5 to 8, and they have a policy statement they put out saying that there's optimal programming for those students in that age cluster.
Okay, so when you actually use the words "they," is that who you're referring to? Is state ed?
There's different research groups that have, put out information about the behaviors of the students and ideas behind it.
Okay.
But there's also an actual policy statement from the Board of Regents.
Okay.
It's from 2003. I just cut the intro and the summary together if you wanted to look at it. But basically they're saying students from that age range in those grade configurations have a lot in common, and they would benefit from specific programs targeted to their needs. So some of the ways to address their needs is to have them in one setting, and then allow teachers to work more specifically with not only a rigorous curriculum, but also trying to meet their needs through possible things like advisories or exploratories, or trying to address the kinds of concerns that they would have. I mean, typically a kid coming into school, especially at that age group, is going to have concerns about academics. What will it be like for me here? What will be different? How do I do it? Where do I go? How do I travel from room to room to room? So they have very logistical types of questions. And then they have social questions. And so you want teachers who are able to answer those questions for the kids and to try to help them understand how peers interact with it.
Can I ask you a question on it? It's going by feedback, and it's going to be a long-winded question because I want to hash it out both ways. There's people that will, now I understand that when you go to a 5th grade model, 5 and 6 are in one area, 7 and 8 in another area. The only time that a 5th grader and an 8th grader are together is on a bus. In the school itself, there's a division. There isn't, an 8th grader isn't going to be hitting on a 5th grader. You don't have that particular setting in the school.
The
Interaction. Whereas, as the person that's worried about the 5th grader and the 8th grader having interaction isn't thinking about a person who has a kindergartner on a bus with a 5th grader, where the 5th grader language and things they talk about is a lot worse that your kindergartner and 1st grader can hear. So they look at it and say that, well, my fifth grader is potentially exposed to this eighth grader. I can't have it together. And we're looking at it saying, well, it's only on the bus. If a kindergarten parent can look at it saying, you know what, I know when my kid gets to school, they're with the kindergartners. They're not with the fifth grader at school. It's on the bus. I can tell my kid, you know, first off, kindergartners in the front of the bus. Fifth graders kind of be in the back of the bus. Don't go to the back of the bus. Don't listen. You know, you can try to, you know, yes, they're going to hear things, but how do you, when you look at that stuff, and I know that that's a big part of when you guys take into it, can you kind of give the reassurance that people that have those concerns, how you look at it, saying put the fifth grader with the eighth grader because they're more in tune there versus a fifth grader with in an elementary setting, where you look at how that interaction there is.
So I think the context is always going to be unique to the particular school or to the parent perceptions of what's happening. But what we have tried to do at East is to have sort of a fifth, sixth grade wing almost, and a seventh, eighth grade wing. There are definitely opportunities for the students to interact. They have shared facilities, but they're not necessarily scheduled at the same time. So you, depending on how a building schedules, you might not have eighth graders in the cafeteria with fifth graders, etc. So there's opportunities for interaction and there's shared facilities, but I think there is definitely sort of that upper school, lower school type of organizational structure. That answers your question.
Yeah. Just want people, because people are watching, I just want them to know that that is a point that people have, and that as a board and as an administration, you guys know about that, and it's something that you don't take lightly. It's not something you just say, oh, the dice this year had a 5 and a 6 on it, so therefore they're together. You know, if it has 4 and 6 next year, what? Fourth and sixth grade is going to be together. You know, that there was a lot of thought and a lot of planning, and the security is a big feature, and it's something that is looked at. So
we did when we did the East Elementary change have an extensive discussion on these specific topics, and I think due to the shortness in time between when we knew this was coming as a question, I think that's part of what Ann wants to work with. Brian Graham and Vinnie DeLoso both were part of that presentation, as were Christy Angrasano and Rachel Badger. So we had the people at those buildings talk about those very unique situations. So I think it would be wise probably in a different, because I have a feeling we've gone for quite a while in this discussion. And I think I'd like to have Dr. Crawford involved in that too. I think that is a critical discussion because it will be one of those bending points in this whole plan, in the whole process. So that has to be, you know, more I think, fully vetted in a process of discussion. So I think I would suggest that be whether you want, in what format you want it. I think that's your call. But I think I would like to have that done with some of the other, including the two principals now, Matt and Sharon, who now manage it now, because they're the ones who are going to be executing what I think you want to hear from us. So I think it would be good for them to be part of that too.
Yeah, and I certainly can't make a statement about what it would look like in a different building or a different configuration.
Well, it would also be nice too to hear the person at East Middle saying, this is what it was before, this is what it's been like after. You know, and you got the person at West Middle saying, you know, well, this is what it's been like, this is what I've seen going on over there, this is what we can't do over here because of how we are. And I think that would be something that would be nice to hear.
That's exactly what I think we need, because we have experienced the change.
Yeah.
I do have one curricular question. I have two questions. One we're not going to get because time is running short. But one has to do with the how much autonomy. Well, let me back up. Knowing that we all want students across the district to have a similar educational experience, okay, in terms of opportunities, learning outcomes, and things of that nature. I'm curious as far as, you know, where the principal autonomy comes into that and how that affects, you know, curricular decisions and also, you know, development of school and classes, you know, even with, you know, like the character development, because a lot of that stuff has, because we see there's a different character development model at each elementary school. So not every child is having a similar learning experience. So that's one of my concerns I'd like to explore, and another one. The other one is based on, and I know we're speaking in generalities, nothing specific, but based on the current numbers and the size differences in elementary school populations, is there a concern that students are having differing educational experiences just based on population sizes? Yeah, from a curricular standpoint.
No, I think so, for example, students across the district in grade 5 would have the same materials that they're using in classes. We have worked pretty hard to try to standardize curriculum. They may implement it slightly differently depending on the needs of the students, depending on some of the preferences for organization in the classroom, but they have the same basic skills and concepts that they need to get across to students. So in terms of the curriculum, I feel that we are relatively similar. Okay. It may be implemented a little differently. Is that?
That's exactly, yes, thank you.
I do have a question. I know that we've talked a lot about, this commission is all about looking at ways of saving money. How does having a 5 through 8 configuration save money? Aside from taking 5th and 6th grade out of these elementary schools and say, oh, look, your enrollment is down so much, now we can close your school.
I think even Dr. Crawford, and that's why I wanted him to speak to that again, I think his passion is for other than a 7-8 configuration. Savings is and I think we obviously have information that we know about teams and student and staffing usages right now that may be benefited by certain changes, but I think it's hard to tonight talk about those, Pat, because we know what we could do today, but we want to know what we can do in comparison to where we'd like to be, and then you have that ability to draw that conclusion between those differences.
But as Brian said that Dr. Crawford feels very passionately about it, and why he feels so passionate about it. He was a leader of a middle school that was 5 to 8, and he has his first-hand experience. You're talking about bringing Matt and Sharon in, which makes perfect sense. But Dr. Crawford, when he was a principal of Winsville, was a principal of a very successful middle school experience, and he understands the nature of having a faculty work as teams in order to meet the needs of the students at those grade levels, and he can talk to it from a very personal way and a very passionate way because of his career experiences at it. So I think that give him the opportunity to be able to share with you, and I think that may be able to add to what Ad has indicated here tonight.
Plus I think as you move through the change, with hopefully the goal ultimately is to level and at the high school level, so you don't have the disparate number of students on each side, which is one of the challenges of then providing the unique programs across the board. When you have the disparate size, you have more kids being moved on a daily basis between buildings, so that they can have a program that might be provided at West as opposed to East and vice versa. So I think when you get into that, then you can begin to see some of the both actual costs associated with doing that. Okay. And is that what you want your child to do during the day, is spend 30 minutes on a bus to go across town to have a course that if we structured our program in a big and with a goal towards some levelness down the road, that we would be able to better provide services in a location or in multiple locations? Because I do believe that is a staffing challenge we have right now because of under 900 in one high school and over 1,300 in the other. And that disparate size gets you into that whole thing. Not only do students travel, but teachers travel. So some of your time is spent there. So I think there's a group of savings, some economic, and some programmatic, and some practical. And I think if we describe better for you those problems, you may, be able to whittle through some of the pieces. Okay, every savings isn't going to be dollars at the bottom line. Some of the savings is better delivery, better servicing the student's need in a location as opposed to multiple locations. Although the committee might say, we want to have multiple locations, or we want to have, you know, something else, and I want to bring something else up because you don't want to hear my
How do you get your best return on
how do you get, yeah. So I do think everything we do, as long as I've been here, has never solely been based on what's the dollar, what's the savings. It has been first on what is the best thing for the students. Everything we've ever done has been what is the best thing for the students. And that's why sometimes you're spending with an extra literacy specialist, or you get an extra social worker, or you might have a security, you have SROs in a certain building, or we have certain needs, or we have some diversity. So I mean, I think that's the part that I think is we better define that and try to work on that and think about what are the savings, and it's not always the almighty buck. And I'm the financial guy who's saying that. The savings isn't always the almighty buck. It's sometimes how do you provide a better service to those students. And that's a critical component of what we try to do. When you ask us what we value, that's one of the things we value very highly. How do we get, for our students, those best things? And that's where the passion part, I think, from Mark on 5, 6, 7, 8, because it's more about the emotional growth of a child in 5, 6, 7, 8 than it is necessarily other aspects that people might want to put on a balance sheet. So as an accountant, I speak to that very carefully, but I understand there is a very significant difference, and it's the part that I think you do want us to explore. So I think that's a great question, and that's something we can look at to make sure that we've communicated that again, I think that's part of the issue of the additional stuff, the information, and how you want to receive it and have it provided to you.
And may I also clarify, I was responding to a particular question about why 5 to 8. It doesn't mean that by implication 6 to 8 is bad. So I just want to be really clear.
Okay.
So I'm answering that particular question.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's what, I mean, one thing that this committee, you know, first of all, we're to save money, but we're also to figure out what's best for the students in things that, like, I mean, hell, I'm going to save us $2 million right here. Let's just get rid of kindergarten, right? I mean, but that's obviously not anything that we all want. So one thing we're having trouble with is 5th grade moving up in the west side is really where a lot of sticking points is with a lot of stuff. So I want to be able to find out why we're going to be going through all this trouble we're going through, and you're not going to comment on it, but redistricting is going to have to happen in order to get 5th grade in the middle school on the west side. And it's going to be a lot of pain for people. Why do we want to do that? Is it beneficial? So that's what I'm just trying to, so I can help relate to the community when we're talking, like the reason why it works. That's all. That's specifically why I wanted to ask that question. So thank you.
Okay, well, I think we are getting to the point where I'm seeing everyone's eyes starting to glaze over. So I think that
this is fun.
I got some
great stuff.
Pizza's coming in about 5 minutes.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I just gotta go home.
All right. Well, I would like to thank all of you for your time, because I know that the questions that we posed required a lot of time on your part to put together facts and figures and so forth. It's not something that was just lightly done. So we appreciate that, and I am sure that we will have, through this process, many more questions. And it's really great that we have that relationship, that we can all work together on that. So we thank you for coming in tonight. And you're welcome to stay, or you can feel free to leave, because I know y'all have to be back here in the morning.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Oh no, tomorrow's Friday. That's right. Yeah, that's right. One of your last Fridays. Yep, one of your last Fridays. Okay, so coming up, we've got subcommittee reports. So I think that's important that we get to that, and then also we need to talk a little bit about the public information meetings that we're looking to put together. So subcommittee reports. I know that last Thursday, Brian Janet's group and Corey's group met and worked some things out. So if you guys want to do a little, I don't know who wants to talk, or
Brian.
Okay. Brian's going to be the spokesperson.
Okay, with our meeting, we pretty much whittled down and we got it down to 3 basic proposals that we want to research to go forward with. We have one is closing Potter's Road, redrawing the redistrict line to even out the enrollment at all the elementary schools. Allendale, Clinton, and Northwood would feed East Middle and East Senior. West and Winchester would feed West Middle and West Senior.
Say that all over again. Yeah.
Okay, so we close.
Do you want to like write?
No. I can.
Just go through one more time. I got Clinton, Northwood, and Allendale would be east.
Yep.
And then
West and Winchester would be west.
okay.
Allendale would be east.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's proposal number 1.
Okay, give it to me one more time. So you got.
Oh, here, I'll write it so we got
Sorry,
it.
No, thank you, it's easier that way.
Oh,
Perfect, thank you.
so you got. I hope you don't mind when you're going to write this stuff here.
No, that's fine. They didn't put save on the board, right?
Okay, so you got 1 is close.
We kind of reworked
Potter. Redraw district lines east is Allendale, Clinton, Northwood,
Clinton is what?
east.
east. And west is west and Winchester. When we go through redrawing the district lines, the whole purpose of that is to sit down with Kevin Love, go through the population map, and put the kids to the school that's closest to them. We're not taking the Potter's Road kids and saying all Potter's Road kids are going to Northwood. We're saying, okay, we got a section of Potter's Road that is up over in this area here, and it's closest to west. So we're going to send them to west. And we got another section over here that's closest to Winchester. We're going to send them to Winchester. There could be kids in the middle here where right now they go to west, but they live on this side of the town, which is closest to east, so we would take them and put them into Allendale. They're going to the same campus, they're in the same area, we're putting them at the same campus. But when they get through here, where they live is closest to East Middle and East High School. We want them to follow that line. So when we redraw the lines, the whole purpose of redrawing these lines is to put the kids at the school that's closest to them. That's the whole point of redrawing the line. It's not to disrupt everyone's lives. It's to say what is going to put the kids on the bus the shortest amount of time, and how do we even out the enrollment? Because the whole point is to not have one school with 600 kids and another school with 170 kids.
Where's Potter's going?
Potter's is going to whichever school is closest to them. So they're, so the Potter's kids, if you live closest to west, you're going to go to west. If you live closest to Winchester, you're going to go to Winchester.
But they're going to feed into that west.
Right, they're going to feed into the west side.
Yeah,
yep, they're going to stay to the west path.
Yeah, that's what we needed to know.
Yep.
So you would be redistributing the Allendale kids, because the ones that go to Allendale that are over in Cambridge Square are going to go to East High School. That's like, that's a hell of a ride every day. You know, I mean, that's
well, depends. Not necessarily.
Yeah, that's off Berg Road. That's all those kids down that way, all the way into off of Lake Avenue.
But I think Kathy
they could
was
end up at West
talking.
Elementary.
Yeah, but if those kids.
They not be close to the West Elementary.
Yeah, if that house, if that neighborhood is closer to West, then they're gonna go into West. If they're closer to the West Senior, if they're closer to West Middle and West Senior, we're gonna keep on the West path and they're gonna go from Allendale to West.
Okay, so.
But their neighborhood is gonna stay the same. We're not gonna take kids on the same street and divide up a neighborhood to say this neighborhood's gonna be half West and half Allendale. The whole point is to try to keep the neighborhoods together so that the kids that are playing together are still going to the same school. So chances are, if we take a neighborhood and we move them from West to Allendale, that whole neighborhood is moving. All their friends are going with them. It's not.
So basically, it's redistricting the entire district,
Yep.
taking all the kids and moving all the kids around.
Yep.
Okay. And Union Road is the line?
No clue where the line is. It all depends when we sit down with Kevin to find out what works best to fill the schools and distribute everything evenly. Because we can't say right now, is Union going to be the line? Because maybe it isn't the line all the way across. Maybe it's a line to here and then it jets over and comes back. It's just a way to how do we do this to keep everyone at their school closest.
So ostensibly with the population shift and decline, you might have to revisit this to see how, once you redraw them, if all of a sudden there turns out to be a dip near a certain elementary school and there's a plus in another one, you know, you'd have to revisit it down the road.
Yep.
Generally speaking, it has happened where the redistricting, and Jim and I have looked through it, Joe too, and you, Joe. It's been like maybe every 10 or 12 years.
Every 20 years. Every 20 years.
I think it was less than that this last
It might be
time.
18, but when I counted it out, it was every 18,
So
20 years.
it's happening pretty regular, like, so it's a lot of work.
Well, the pros and cons from what we just heard, I mean, with doing something like that, you're almost trying to get back to community schools. And what we just heard from Mr. Schulz was that the closer the kids live to where they're bused, we may end up shooting ourselves in the foot with aid for busing.
Right.
So that's just one, I would say, con to consider when you start putting kids in the school that's closest to where they live. Because you're going to, anybody who's within a mile, you're going to lose that funding. So that's just something, you know, I don't know if we're doing
So then we're going to profit on our kids to have to drive far.
Well, no, but I mean, we're not going to keep.
Is basically what we're doing.
No, but I mean, but we're not going to just keep.
That's really not going to happen in that model.
No? Okay.
No, it's not going to happen because the kids who are in Allendale, who live close to Allendale, who are getting bused to this campus, is going to split between Allendale and West. The only people who are going to be redoing something totally with their busing is Potter Road.
Okay.
And everybody else will stay exactly the same.
Okay.
Not based on what he just said, though. He just said that the kids who
Well, he said he's going to split the Allendale kids between where they already are or West Elementary, which is both on this campus.
Yeah.
So they're going to bus exactly the same distance.
Okay.
Middle school and high school where they would,
Yeah.
would get
Big
changed.
change.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would think that we still would get either a wash or a potential increase to some of these Potter's kids that are within a mile of Potter's that we're not getting any aid on now. Most likely are going to be more than a mile away from either West or Winchester where they are, because the school is nowhere near as close to them as it currently is. So.
What are the general numbers then? I know we can't have exact, but what are we looking then at building numbers for the elementary buildings? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to figure out like how they're distributed then.
Right now we have 402 at Allendale.
I don't think so. Are these the current numbers or what the new numbers would be?
This is the current one.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Clinton has 579.
Is that, well, I know with Clinton and Northwood it'd be, but is that Allendale without the fifth graders?
Because no one's looking at it
No, that's what he has in this building right now.
Okay, all right.
Northwood has 334. West has 634. Winchester has 287.
And we have Potter's has 384. So the thought is that most of the Potter's kids are going to wind up here. So it's going to give you 900, 12, almost 1,300 here.
No, because you're gonna be moving my whole neighborhood out of West and putting us to East. How
Well, I'm just adding it up right now.
Okay, no, but what I'm saying is how can you? Because you're saying West is 634, and but if you're gonna take the whole east side of Union and move them to the school we're supposedly closer to, which I guess, I don't even know if it's
Well, it
true.
might not be. I
Would
don't
be
know.
Clinton, I guess it's Clinton or Northwood, then that whole group is gone from West, so. you're
Right,
adding
if you
three-
want me to try to come up with this number right now, I can't do it. Because I have a sheet that has a whole bunch of little dots on it.
Okay.
And if you would like
Yeah,
to try
we
to add
need-
up the
we
dots,
need
knock
a
yourself
correct-
out.
That's what we needed
need a
from
body
Kevin.
grade.
Yeah, that's what we
was
wanted.
to
We
sit
wanted
down
to sit
with
down
him
with
and his
Kevin
computer.
to go through it to figure out if we do a line here, where does it work? If we do a line here, what does it do? The whole goal is to figure out a way, how do we get all 5 of these schools with as close to the same enrollment as possible?
Right.
How do we even out the enrollment?
Well, don't forget that you're gonna have to take the 5th grades out of those particular schools too.
Yes.
So that's gonna change your numbers too.
Yep. And I know Kevin looked like he could do everything with that program that he used because he had 4 different proposals and mapped kids differently and it
And
laid
then-
it out from elementary to middle to high school.
So then, my question with this proposal is then, for the middle school, then how are we getting the 5th graders into West Middle? By taking Allendale,
The hope was by taking Allendale to east.
so we'll
that
take
hopefully
all
that
of
will-
Allendale on the whole, we'll go from fifth grade up and shift the whole Allendale line
To east.
to east. So
Yes,
5th,
that was
6th, 7th,
the
8th.
whole, yeah, the goal there, because we knew that west right now, middle is at capacity and has no room for anybody else. In 5 years from now, things work great. There's a little bit of room in west middle, but there's a whole bunch of room in east middle right now. So we got, right now, you can't fit the 5th graders in west middle. So the only way to try to do it is to come up with a way that we can disperse this enrollment to find out how do we fit the 5th graders in west middle. If you keep things the way they are right now, you will never fit 5th graders in west middle unless you move the building. You would have to physically move west middle out of its building, repurpose it as something else to fit 5th graders in that building right now. So that's how that works. So I can't break this down any further because without going through a computer program that can break it through, you know, and obviously same thing too. I can't tell you which neighborhood is closest to east versus closest to west. I live at Harlem and Seneca Street.
What if we
I
were
don't
to
know the
keep-
other part of town that
What
great.
if we were to keep all the elementary buildings and kids configured exactly where they are right now? And then for when they graduate 5th grade from the west, well, 4th or 5th grade from the west side. So let's say we take Allendale, once you graduate from, we'll say 4th grade right now, going into 5th, or let's just keep it as this. Allendale, when you're about to graduate from 5th grade, you won't go to West Middle, you would go straight to East Middle. So then that way you're not disrupting so much, but you're moving them right into the East Middle. Instead of redrawing lines right now, like the 2nd graders in Allendale, oh, now you're gonna go over to Clinton. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, what if we just started at the middle school to free that up there?
But what would happen with that, you're gonna have families then that have an older elementary school student graduating out, going to the east side, but still have younger elementary students on the west side.
Right.
You're gonna have families that are divided between
east to west.
Right.
But I feel like it's not so much a division in elementary schools as it in the middle school and the high schools.
But what about
logistically as a parent? I mean, I've
Yeah.
only got one child, so it wouldn't be an issue for me. But I'm thinking you have families, 5 kids. And
Right.
if that's family you're moving, it's hard enough to try to fit in all the activities. Now you
Right.
have to split your time between both sides of the district.
And that's what the proposals that, you know, Brian Graham and Kevin Love had first come up with, is sending Winchester and Potter all the way over to Northwood too. It's the same thing. I have an older daughter in West Middle, and now you're gonna put my kids in East Middle. It's gonna be, you're gonna run into that problem anywhere.
Lisa, why didn't we have a report on the subcommittees and then try and go to Kevin Love and see what some of the numbers should be?
Yeah, that's what I
mean,
thought we were
I
doing.
think that it's easier for us to absorb if we had something in front
Well,
of us.
the purpose right now was to give you guys an update on the subcommittee. My understanding is we're not going to be going through the subcommittee proposal piece by piece at every meeting. If people want input on the subcommittee meeting, they got to show up at the subcommittee meeting. I feel that if we put together a proposal, and I had what, 8 people that showed up to the meeting. If these 8 people worked their tails off and we put together a proposal, and 2 weeks later we come in front of this board, and this committee, and all of a sudden everybody rips it to shreds and says, well, I don't like this, I don't like this, you go ahead and go research this, go research that. Well, you know what? If you want the voice heard on that subcommittee proposal, show up at the subcommittee meeting.
Brian, I'm not.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just saying,
not
though, but
saying
I
that,
can't.
to have
I don't think that we
proposals
can.
would be easier.
I don't want it to get to the point to where everyone's thinking that the subcommittee is going to give all these little tidbits of the proposal. The whole point of the subcommittee is we're giving you guys saying these are the things we're looking at. If people are interested in input on these subcommittees, I'll tell people when the meetings are, show up at the next subcommittee meeting. Outside of that, I think our goal as a subcommittee is to take these, put together a proposal, and then when the proposal is gathered, then we meet as a committee to say, here's what Eric's group came up with, here's what our group came up with, and we start to dissect those to say which proposals do we like, what don't we like, and go from there.
Then to avoid the kind of conversation that's happening now, would it be easier for you to email everybody? This is, we met, we came up with this, this, and this.
You did.
If you have concerns, if you want more information, if you'd like to address it, this is when our next meeting is, welcome aboard, come on in. But to open it up to a discussion among everybody without expecting some kind of feedback.
Well, and I think we need numbers, because I think at this point, you have to be able to look at numbers until we have to know number-wise that it's going to work. Do you know what I mean? I think I think there's still, I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I think that we need, I think as the proposals start to move a little bit, we have to get numbers.
I think at this point, what he's supposed to be doing is just telling us where they are on the discussion.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say I'm saying this is the concept that we came up with. We haven't.
He needs to tell us what they.
Well, and I'm sorry, but when Lisa asked for numbers, I thought she meant numbers, not today's numbers, because we all know today's numbers. We need to know. So I apologize. I was trying to clarify because I didn't think you realized that Lisa was asking for the going forward numbers.
Right.
But
My
if you don't
thing
have
is
those,
just we have to
that's
make
not
sure
your
that
fault.
they're going to fit. That's all. That's why I'm asking numbers.
We don't have
because
those numbers yet.
I think it's easy to
That's
look at something and not necessarily know whether or not the numbers are actually going to work.
And
that's all.
Maybe that's something that
the subcommittee could shoot off to Kevin Love after they've come up with this and say.
I don't think
"Geez,
anybody's
Kevin, can you
necessarily
give us that?"
attacking either.
No.
I mean, we're just questioning to
Clarifying.
try and make sure that we have the information that we have. So, I mean, I know I do, and I know we all know Lisa does, go home and do more work. So I don't think anybody is necessarily attacking. I think it's just trying to get all the information that we can out of this proposal because, I mean, I'll tell you right now, I, for one, it's hard for me. I have these dates. It's very hard for me to get out. So I'm going to take what you guys did, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to look at it, and then I'll take it from there.
So what
I
I'm
mean,
going
there's
to
not many more
interrupt.
than 8 people here right now.
I was under the impression that this information was emailed to the group, and if I was supposed to.
No, we didn't even get the questions.
Who did it get emailed to? Just,
we didn't even get the questions.
just the subcommittee?
Oh yeah, I emailed it to the subcommittee and said this is a.
I'm going to take responsibility for this. I screwed up. I thought when Brian emailed, it went to everyone. Apparently, it just went to the subcommittee. So that's why I didn't share it with everyone because I assumed you had it. So I take full responsibility for that. You guys would have had this stuff the night Brian put it together. and sent it out. I thought everyone got it. So that's my ignorance with email. I apologize about that. I take full responsibility. Really, the concept is to have multiple subcommittees meeting, coming up with the stuff, so we don't all have to keep meeting and spending hours on every proposal. So I totally screwed the pooch on that, and I apologize.
One thing I think we're forgetting to, this is a subcommittee.
It was a beautiful YouTube moment.
I can't run the meeting like I'm on TV. I'm good.
This is a subcommittee report, though. This is not a conclusive anything. It's
Right.
just a work in progress. So we need to take these pieces and put them together, but it's a work in progress. You're not going to have all the answers at every given moment. It's a work in progress.
Can I have a question just back to the proposal?
Not the pooch.
I'm not dissecting it, I'm just asking a question. You got it broken down with the elementary schools in the redistricting. I got confused. When you redistrict, are you going to do, and you draw these lines, is that going to affect the kids who are middle school and the high school as well?
Yes.
So we're not going to be splitting families where we have one east side, one west side. Is we redistrict, everybody shifts.
That's what I'm getting.
Right. Our thought on this is we want to take, how do we redraw these lines so that we even this out, even the middle school out, even the high schools out? How does this all work to even everything out across the board? And then by doing that, one of the things we noticed was, look at when East closed and people had a choice to go between Clinton and Northwood. And if you gave a choice to the parent, look how much that's skewed the numbers. So our thought is, when you redistrict, a kid going from junior to senior year, you get to stay in your school. Because you've been through it, you should graduate where you were. Everybody else would go to that line and would change. Our thought on that was
my question. If you had a kid who was in Allendale today and a kid who's in West Middle today, all right, say we have a 6th grader at West Middle and a 4th grader at Allendale, all right, and we redraw the lines, both of those kids are going to move to the east side. He's going to leave West Middle and go to East Middle. Correct?
Right.
Okay. That's
all. Yeah. So I
that's
thought
the way you're going to open up the middle school at West.
Right.
To the 5th grade.
Right.
Yeah, that's our thought, because we want to make sure that we
do that, there's no way, or I can't figure it out of how you can
I
put
understand.
those people in.
And it's not a bad plan.
Because our thought is, if we give if you give too many options inside here, we may come up with this and say, hey, we made room in West Middle for the 5th graders, and we give all these options, and all of a sudden, oh wait, all these people chose to stay with West. It doesn't work now.
I don't think we're here to give people options at the end of the day.
So that's why our thought is we want to redistrict, draw, and see how do we.
If you add up your east numbers right now, and it's late, so my addition might not be perfectly right. If you add up those east numbers, you're at 1315. If you add up the west numbers with Potter's Road, you're at 1305. So you're balanced with, so within 10 kids, my God, I don't know how you could get more balance than that.
And the only concern here now is, what do we do with the Allendale kids? Where you're going to split the ones who are way out here on the far side, to shift them into west. And then some of the Potter's kids will go to Allendale and make that up. So it's going to be that Kevin Love line.
Yep.
And then you're going to take the 5th grades out too, don't forget that. Yeah.
Right. So, I think that's the only consideration that was really major from all of us was, when you shift Allendale to east, what do we do with the people who are Orchard Park Road west?
Yeah, the idea is to figure out what makes best sense. Like I said, our idea is to keep the neighborhoods together, so that if somebody does have to change a school, typically their friends are changing with them. So hopefully the disruption to the person isn't going to be a major disruption. You may have to buy different colored clothes, But that's the, you know, that's our idea there, you know, that how do we get things so they equate all the way across the board. And like I said, Kevin Love is integral in that whole part as to where the heck do those lines get drawn.
But I mean, right now, with currently where Allendale, Clinton, and Northwood are, where Potters, West, and Winchester, your numbers are equal if you add those up. Now, the thing is, what you have to figure out is the middle school piece. That's the kicker. But because you're not, by taking Allendale out of West Middle, is that enough to get the 5th graders of Potter, West, and Winchester in there? That's what you got to figure. Those are the numbers you got to figure out.
Well, and the other thing is too, by only closing one building, are you still, when you get the very specific numbers there, are you still having underutilized buildings? That would be my only other question.
Right. Northwood still is at
small, and Winchester is still small. Not to be negative,
well,
but
that's something you just work on as you move forward.
That has to still be.
Well, no. Well, his proposals were.
Eric's.
No, that's Eric's proposal.
That's Eric's proposal.
That's not Brian's.
We only deal with closing Potters. My committee only deals with Potters Road as the only one closing. Eric's is the one that deals with Potters and Winchester closing. So I have nothing to do with 2 schools closing. I only have dealing with Potters closing. That's it.
All right, so are you going to share your other proposal?
Yep. So the other 2 proposals all go to a one system. So you get high school is the West Senior Campus, middle school is the East Senior Campus. There is no, it's just West Seneca, there's no East and West anymore. We redraw the lines again because we want to even out the numbers at the elementary school. West Middle now can be used for community ed all day, and then we could also put the district offices at West Middle. So that now you get rid of, now you're going to a one system school. There is no East, there is no West. It's just West Seneca. The high school is located at the senior building because it's a larger building. The middle school is located at the East Senior Complex. One of the things that we're allowed to do is, theoretically, we also talked about was the 7-8, I should say senior and middle school. Because senior would house 7-8, the middle school would house 5 and 6. And now you actually have 2 separate buildings, so the security concerns that people have mentioned about 5th graders and 7th and 8th graders intermingling, now there's a physical break in between them. They're in different buildings.
But same campus there.
Same campus.
My understanding.
It's kind of using the East Middle building as 5-6, and the East Senior is 7-8.
And my understanding with that one, there's no lines that need to be redrawn.
Well, it would only be to try to make sure we even out this enrollment, because you got 384 Potters kids that are now going to another
but that doesn't
building.
Right, but we don't have to redistrict if there's one system.
For the elementary schools.
Just Potters.
No, the elementary schools themselves, because you have 374 in Northwood, and that doesn't.
Oh, okay, I get it. We're not trying to fit elementary schools on each side of town. I get it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, the whole point here is we still want to get the balance of numbers between these 5 schools.
Okay.
So that's why we would still look at redrawing the lines for how do we best balance those numbers.
Okay.
Because that was one of the things
So
that.
your only limitations with those would be the actual physical size of the structure.
Exactly.
Yep. So, and then number 3 that we looked at is very similar to number 2, except the high school is at east, the middle school is at west, and all these come over there. So it's trying to figure out, does this one system work better with east is the high school complex and west is the middle school complex? So the difference between 2 and 3 is which one works better to house the high school, which one is better to house the middle school, which is the 5 through 8, and then keeping some way to keep all 5 of these schools at similar enrollment so that people have the same services. Because one of the things everyone talked about was every one of these schools has one social worker.
Yep.
Right?
One nurse.
There's one social worker, one nurse.
And one psychologist.
This social worker in this school has a lot more time on their hands than this social worker here. So this person at Winchester is getting more social work and more access to the nurse and more time spent than the person at West. This person has half the amount of time that they can spend with each student just because of the simple fact that you have twice as many kids. You have the same amount of staff, you have twice as many kids.
Or with the savings, you can add more staff to, say, a second nurse or a 0.5 nurse or that sort of stuff too.
Right. So that's kind of what we addressed on those.
When you're saying similar populations in the new configuration of elementary schools, are we better to say similar percentages of capacity?
I think we're thinking more similar enrollment because we're thinking
But
of
can
the
we
number.
do that with the buildings we have?
Right, some buildings can only house so much is what he's saying, so looking at the percentages is probably the better way of looking at it. Because some
Yeah.
buildings.
Like
can
for
only
instance,
fit
if you
in
look at
Winchester.
Northwood, what is the percentage that, what is it, the
What's the-
capacity right now,
What's the
percentage?
capacity
If we
for each
put
building, the capacity
X amount in there, what
I
would
mean,
it
this building
First
can
look at it, we don't
house,
have single buildings
without
close to
administration
capacity.
offices, you can probably easily house 1,000 or more. So percentage-wise, you can't say every school's going to have 1,000. So that's what they're saying is the percentage instead of that.
Our only thought on that is we were thinking numbers, so I'll take that to the committee and say, do we want to look at percentages over numbers? The only thing is if we go to percentage over numbers, will administration take that into account and then, okay, we're going to give 2 social workers here, so you're going to get that social worker here. Will they do that? Or won't they do that? But that's not our thing, but that's our thought.
We can recommend it.
Yeah.
We would want to,
We
that's
can
part of,
do
we
one
want to
A,
make
one B.
sure that all the kids are getting the same thing across the board. And if we ended up hearing that, you know what, all of these are going to stick with one social worker, one nurse, I don't care how many students are in it, then our thought would probably be to say, well, we want to do our best to even out the enrollment number versus the percentage. Because we want to make sure that each person has the same access.
And maybe
Everyone
what you
has
can
the
do is
same.
a 1A and 1B. You can look at both options. So.
Something the committee might want to also think about is because I know it was this part of the discussion was that the high school cannot house 9 to 12 in one building right now. Right.
Well,
So what if you were to put 9th grade into that middle school configuration in number 2? If you were to put 9th grade in with the 7th and 8th graders at the East Senior High School, because the East Senior High School would probably be able to house 7, 8, 9. And that way then your high school might be able to house your 10, 11, 12. I don't know. I don't know what the numbers would actually be because I don't know what 9th grade is. And
When we looked, I know when we thought about this one here with West Senior as the building, at the time that this would come into play, 2015, 2016, with what the projections are number-wise, there's enough space in West Senior to fit 9 through 12.
oh, okay.
Because if you look at past enrollment in West Senior, they've had 2,200, 2,300
Right,
kids.
but Joe Cantavio explained that last time, and I was the one that asked that question because I'm an ex-West kid.
Right.
And I remember it being that high, and he made a really good point, and I didn't think about it, is that those classrooms used to be able to house that many students in a classroom. And I think maybe you weren't here that he mentioned that because of the computers, the printers and whatnot in the classroom, they can't house that many
Yeah,
anymore.
we brought that up at the subcommittee meeting, and what we looked at, I think, was we looked at numbers just from within the last couple of years, trying to figure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
All
we're not
right.
looking at the high school, say, happening now. We're looking at like more of a couple of year plan. So
Yeah, you kind of have to
yeah.
know what the ninth grade count is,
Yeah.
you know? But no.
Brian Schulz also said that that wasn't appropriate.
I know, he
right
said it
now.
wouldn't be
And
able
I don't
to
even
do it
think there's
either.
enough lockers in.
There are.
Yeah, that was one of the questions we had then was.
There's 1,600 lockers.
Okay, locker and desk.
There are.
There are.
100 lockers.
They said the one.
Well, we really need to define this new district lines and that to see if it works now with the hodgepodge of people coming from all over the place to those buildings. We have to see how we could make it work so the numbers work the way we hope they will, consistently at the different levels, by what Kevin Love's magic
Right.
may be.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
just
so-
as a sidebar in the high schools, and this is my little pet peeve, as a grandma, I want to be able to go see my grandkids plays and musicals, and that, you know, the high schools do all the biggest plays and musicals, and access to the senior community is West Senior because of the ramp as opposed to the stairs. And I've gone and taken my aunt, and I've had to help her in, and she can only go up the 1, 2 stairs, that was it, you know, so when
which
you're
building?
looking at the community.
East Senior. Do you remember when we went on the tour? That has those crazy stairs that are real wide, but there's not.
All different widths.
Yeah, and there's not like really good railing. Remember?
So that's something. That's something
They are
that needs to be
putting
looked
the railing in
into.
the middle, but still,
So
when
West
it comes down
Senior
to
has
it,
better-
it's
And I
better
I actually wrote down how many seats
Corey,
there
can you
were.
write that down?
Yeah,
West Senior has better
I think
senior
West is a
access.
larger auditorium.
West Senior has a much larger auditorium, and I actually wrote that down that day because.
But the people who, when you go to an East production, the visual is better because of the
Yes.
incline, but I don't know if you want to exclude that senior community by doing, you know, just a sidebar on the high school.
Oh, because things
Yeah.
we talked about,
That's-
even when you go to these types of situations, it was, is there enough space to do all the musicals, to have the extracurriculars that we want to do?
Right.
What happens if now you're down to one sports team? Now there's some programs that
500 to
need
600
both
seats.
schools to do a sports team. Other ones that are self-sustaining, where there's a West and an East sports team. You know, well, our thought was then the intramural program gets a big kick because now you have kids that maybe didn't make a team here, but now our intramural program can be ramped up and people are still going to have the opportunity to participate.
Do you have a?
So that's kind of, we trying to figure out, we know things that on that it becomes, we know that right now there's 2 musicals that go on. So a lot more kids get to experience the musicals. If we went to 1,
Right.
how does that work? Do you still do 2? Like all these elementary schools, some of the elementary schools do a musical. Some don't do a musical. If we go to this model, can we get something where there's, how do we get the same programs across the board at all 5 elementary schools? How do we get the same thing, I know we're never going to get the same clubs available at everything, but how do we at least get some of the base value programs that we all agree on that we want to have everyone have access to? How do we best distribute that?
Brian, do you have another date for your subcommittee?
I was thinking the opposite Thursdays of these meetings. So we have meetings scheduled what was it?
Can you just email us the dates?
Yeah, so I was thinking that next Thursday, the 28th, and then the one that's in between, which is the 17th.
If you can email all the stuff out then to everyone too. Like I screwed up there.
Yeah, what I'll do is I will, the email I put together to the subcommittee, because I originally sent the subcommittee to make sure I had everything right. So if there was something that was wrong, people could get back to me and say, Brian, nope, you were not paying attention at that point. You needed, this is what we said, so we could at least get through that. So I will take this and I will email it out to the whole committee.
Great. And
I'll put the next two meetings. Our thought on as a subcommittee is anybody who's interested on our subcommittee really needs to be at the next meeting. Because I think the next meeting is where we're really delving deeper into this, and we want people to be there with their input, because what we don't want to have happen is we start to feel like we're at the end of the proposal, then somebody new shows up onto the subcommittee, and now all of a sudden they tear it apart, and then we're back to square one again. Because we know we're on a tight deadline. We know October 1st is our deadline to try to come up with something, so we want to make sure that at the next meeting, everyone that's interested shows up so they have their input. After that, it'll be everyone's input comes in when we deliver the proposal here or proposals that we have, and then we talk about it and we discuss it to figure out which ones we like and don't like.
And I just want to reiterate, October is not the deadline. If you remember, one of the proposals was, say, look into closing Potters and then continue to research the rest of the options in part of your proposal. So
right, but the deadline is October to get the recommendations.
Yes, but one of the recommendations
Correct.
is,
But we have to be able to,
Absolutely.
One of the things we talked in almost humorously when we were thinking about it is to take away the east and west names to the middle and the high schools and try to research a prominent West Seneca resident, from the past, and it's going to be the, Joe Schmo type. So we don't have regional east, west, north, south kind of designation to those changed buildings, consolidated buildings.
Okay, so we'll be getting an email from Brian with that information. Eric, you're up.
No, I'm not. I'm not going up at this point. I'm done. No, I'm just kidding.
You're up.
Due to some foresight, no, I haven't been able to hold a subcommittee meeting, so I will be sending out an email. Hopefully, I have secured a space at ECC South Campus, so I'm going to try to shoot for at some point next week.
Great.
Obviously not a Thursday, since Brian ran on that parade by going public and putting it on YouTube. So I'll come up with a different date, possibly Wednesday.
Okay.
So we'll see.
All right. So.
And I'll email it out to everybody, and it'll be open.
Chances are you could still do Thursday, because I highly doubt we're going to have people on both subcommittees. I highly doubt you're going to have people on both.
If that's a challenge, we'll go down.
I would like to be at both.
I'm going to be on both.
Yeah, but I think because for people who want to be at both.
Next Thursday, you're not going to have a meeting at ECC South because it's a football game.
That's true.
That's right.
Couple Bills are playing.
Can have it at my house.
Sorry.
I
Yeah,
can
but
still go
you
to
can't
work
have it
there.
at the South because they park close.
Oh, I can take care of the parking business.
Okay, so last
You know
thing.
who he is.
Last thing that we need to talk about, because we're getting sleepy. So I'm going to give us a 10-minute window here. One of the things that we need to talk about is a public information meeting. And as things are coming together, one of the things that we want to do is we want to keep the public informed on the facts that we have found out. We want them to know what is going on with the actual information, not with the rumor mill going on, not with what they think they might have heard, but what's actually out there.
Yeah.
So put your phone down, be a good listener. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to meet and come up with a forum idea, okay, of what we want to have happen in the public information meeting, because Ed and I talked and we want to have some of it to be factual information. The information that we gained tonight was really good. There was a lot of really good factual information. So we need to kind of talk about how we want to do this, and I think we can talk for a few minutes about it, and then I think a subcommittee of people to kind of formulate what it's going to look like would be helpful, because we don't have, it's tough to work with this many people, but if we can get a subcommittee of people to kind of get it together, and it's going to be coming up quickly, because it's going to be coming up in September.
Do you have an idea of what time the forums are going to be at?
7 to 9 is what we're saying.
Okay.
One person on the subcommittee, I first want to make sure we have is someone who can put together a PowerPoint. Okay.
Perfect. And then I think what we need to talk about is how we want to do it. Do we want district personnel involved in doing it? Do we want it to be all commission people? I mean, I think that personally, you know, Brian Schulz has the financial answers. I don't. I mean, I can talk to some of that, but I'm not comfortable. You know what I mean? I don't have all those answers.
But, I think from a credibility standpoint, we have to have district personnel.
Well, I agree, but I don't. I just, you know, I'm of two minds of it, because first off, I mean, the 21st Century Commission is not just dealing with this one issue, okay? And, you know, that is something that definitely needs to be put out there, and what the whole goal is. By having district representatives here, I mean, I know Brian Graham's on the commission, but if we bring in Brian, if we bring in, and Joe's here too, and then we have our, you know, we do have district representation, but if we bring in, you know, like Brian, somebody like him is going to dominate the conversation just by virtue of his knowledge, and that's going to take away, that's going to align us closer to that. So we would just be an extension of, you know,
that's a discussion Lisa and I were having. I mean, let's be real. What was the format of the meeting tonight? They were the head table, and we were.
But that was what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and that was what it was supposed to be. But in a public information session, we're just going to be an extension rather than an independent commission that's going to make a recommendation to the school board.
Yeah, you know, their charge is to answer questions.
Yes.
Without the in-depth.
What if they weren't up in the front, but rather?
Because I don't want to sit there and have people throwing questions at us that we can't answer.
Well, and on that line, could we do something like a traditional board meeting where we present a certain amount of factual information, whether we present it or maybe Brian Graham, because he is a part of the commission, and then we take comments and questions, but they cannot expect an answer, like a board meeting, where you stand up and you say what you want to say, and they'll go, and then it's not we can't address.
I completely. One of the things that I was one of the things that I was going to push for is we're holding these meetings to communicate. One of the things I definitely want to put in there, no matter how we do it, is even if I have to stay around afterward, I want to have open dialogue with people.
But we're going to be there all night.
I'm telling you, I'll just stay myself. Then that's all. I just want to put it out there that the success I'm having with people is conversation. Not like there's no crappier feeling I have in the world than when someone gives the school board a statement and then they all just like okay.
But that's how every school board, every place.
But we're not the school board.
We should have an agenda, and we should have principal speakers. I mean, really, from the commission. Not a whole bunch of people, but people that can make the presentation.
Yes, and what we had thought about was maybe submitting questions via postcards, so we can then start addressing them.
About security and other people.
But what can we really? I'm sorry. What can we really address when we don't have a whole lot of answers? Where we're still looking for information ourselves.
That's why we want to hold this meeting. Is for my opinion was for the public to say, look, you know, why aren't you guys looking at closing this, or why aren't you looking? This is more to start bringing in some ideas from the public. Because that's what we're getting. Whenever we walk out in the store,
I don't think we're all getting that.
We're not.
Okay.
You know what? People are watching it on YouTube.
And that's why I think if we get their input and just not
about what school is closing, and I don't know.
Do we really have to have a public session before this commission makes a decision and gives it to the board and let the board make that presentation?
Everything is public up until that point anyway.
Really?
Everything is public at that point. This is a public meeting.
Dr. Crawford would really like to have a public information, and Mrs. Bussing would like to have a public information, being that the public has an opportunity to ask questions prior to recommendations being made, just in the process piece.
Yes, and that's great. I think we should take all of their suggestions and all of their questions, and someone should be typing them all or writing them all down.
And
Sorry.
no
Sarah.
no
No
comments.
You know what?
comments made.
I'll backtrack
And then
on
we
that.
come
I like
back
it.
to this and we talk about everything that they brought up and say, okay, this was brought up. Let's talk about this. This was
You
brought
might
up.
make it clear that.
Because then they
the
can
commission
watch
will
it
listen
on
to your
YouTube.
questions, but
You may
no answers
submit
will be given
questions.
because we can't
You may
get
submit
answers.
questions,
We'll
but
discuss
no.
them in our meeting.
Put that disclaimer out there right off the bat.
Right.
And then if they want to hear what we're discussing, they can watch the
on
YouTube
YouTube.
video.
And
It's
they
not,
are.
it's not like we're gonna not discuss it. It's out here for the
Yeah.
public. And
Well-
it's not like we're going into closed session
No.
like the board does.
Right. We
Well,
would
they're
have
out
Our
here.
coworkers are watching.
Out there.
Yeah, we have people here watching.
And I'm getting stopped by teachers and Lisa, I told you, and.
But you don't have the answers, right?
I
Kathy?
don't.
So you can't engage them in
And
a
that's
long
what I-
discussion when you really, I don't know.
Right. I will take what I said and reverse it. I like that idea because if someone does have an idea that works,
Thanks, Dad.
we can. If someone, I love that face. I wish we. Can we rewind that? If we have an idea that works.
You didn't get that.
Well, we got one. If we have an idea that's something we haven't even thought of, that's perfect. Then we can talk about it later. Yeah.
And again, I'm not so much concerned about whether or not we have the answers because we are just a commission that is going to be exploring ideas,
Yeah.
and we're from the community, and that's where my concern was. If we have those representatives, additional representatives outside of the commission joining us on stage, it is going to kind of give a different expectation of what the commission is here to do. Okay, we have a mission. And we've defined it, and we present that. We present the topics we're discussing. We say, you know, we're here for the community to have a voice. We allow the community to have a voice, and it is not us to provide them with an answer. We put that expectation out, and then there you go.
And really,
As long as you put it right up
let's
front, that's what I
also
think
say
right.
too, that anyone who's going to come to this has been watching these on YouTube. So, I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time giving facts because they can get the facts by watching the YouTube videos or going back to our minutes. And then they can come and give their suggestions, ask their questions, and then those can be addressed at
I
a
think
later
that
time.
the certain principal speakers too, if we talk about, you know, if we look at like some of our big like silver bullet moments, we have declining enrollment. We have data that backs that. We have buildings that aren't have full capacity. We have data that backs that. There are budget and audit issues. We have things that back that. We've talked about programming. We've talked about the 5-8 building. We've talked, you know, so if we look at those 4 points and kind of structure it around that, I think that might give it that kind of structure that it needs. And then we can go from there and add, you know, I think it's important to talk about our values, you know, and I think with the monkey thing, Survey Monkey thing, that'll even help a little bit more. But I think we spent a lot of time on those values, and we need to let people know that.
And Lisa, I just want to say, I really think that I agree with that because I think that we need to let people know that we don't take that lightly, and that we didn't just come in saying we're going to close a building. We have our values. We are trying to save programming because we could have very easily come in and said, you know what, we're shutting down sports. We're shutting down music. We're shutting down the arts. But no, we're trying to save our programming, and we're trying to do it by being fiscally responsible, and we're going to close a building. We're doing away with that so that we can save the programming for our children.
And that all of our
need to
children
let
will
people
receive that West Seneca education.
We need to make sure that people understand that.
If closing a building wasn't even discussed at first, I think that new timeline shift is what caused us to have to speed up on that, and that wasn't what we spent most of our time on.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that we want to talk about, we want to state what our mission statement is. We want to have an agenda that's going to have principal speakers, that's going to talk about values. It's going to talk a little bit about our timeline. It's going to talk about declining enrollment, building capacity, the audit budget piece, and programming. We're going to ask the community to submit questions and or ideas. At that time, we will not be giving out any answers, but those will be reviewed by the committee. Does that
I would
sound
say
good?
submit their concerns.
That's a good
question.
idea.
I think it's fair.
Concerns.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And my final question is, you have the air programmed off, right? Because I'm feeling it's getting
Oh,
warm
yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Okay, so my question is there anybody that is willing, because this is going to take some putting together, if there's anybody that would like to sit on the subcommittee of the Public Information Center, or Information Night, sorry. I'm getting bugged. Let me know.
I guess I'm gonna have to, if I'm gonna do the PowerPoint.
All right, so Sarah's going to sit on that.
I'll help with it.
Okay. I will too.
When's the public information?
Okay, so the days that, September obviously is a really difficult month because of open houses.
Right.
So originally we had 2 dates. We originally had September 9th and which is a Tuesday, and Monday, September 22nd, which is a Monday. But we West Middle has their open house, one of their open houses on September 9th, so we changed it to September 10th. So right now we have September 10th at West Middle, September 22nd at East Middle. I did the dates going on, I was trying to stay away from open houses, and that was the schedule I was looking at. There is a conflict on the west side of town. Winchester does have their PT. Okay, the PTA meeting has been moved or something. Okay.
I know someone there, so.
Okay, so we're good on those dates. Okay, they'll be at 7 o'clock. We're doing one on the east side and one on the west side, because I think it's important, because you don't know what proposal will end up, or parts of proposals will be used, and lines can be changed and drawn, and it's going to technically affect the entire community. So, okay, all right. So, thank you very much for coming. I apologize for the really late time.
Thank you.
Okay.